Good morning, everyone. This is Senate Education Committee. It's 9:02 according to my computer. And would you please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance? Senator Gendro.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will start with House Bill 1205. And there are quite a few of you who are signed up to speak on the bill, so I will limit any testimony to 3 minutes. Now, if you have written testimony, please give it to us and then a short summary of what you wanted to say. And if you find that somebody has said everything that you wanted to say, you can just say ditto. So thank you very much. So I will call, the first one is 7 Scores. Oh, I'm sorry. We have to start with the sponsor of the bill. I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Senate Education Committee members. For the record, I am Representative Louise Andrus, and I represent Merrimack County District 5, Andover, Danbury, Hill, Salisbury, and Webster. I am here today as the prime sponsor to introduce House Bill 1205 relative to women's school sports, or by a more familiar title, Fairness in Women's School Sports. As a parent of 3 biological females, and for all biological females, I am here today 100% supporter of safety and fairness in biological female school sports. A little history on this bill. This bill was originally researched and put together by a group of citizens in Newbury known as the Newbury Conservative Coalition, which included some of the people I have met, Stephanie Spalding, Polly Lowe, and John Gamowski. In September 2023, John, a member of the NCC, wrote to me, Newbury Conservative Coalition started this project in mid-July 2023 in order to enable women in New Hampshire to compete fairly in women's sports events, just as over 20 other states have done. Today, there are 3 more additional states that have passed laws. It was a big project entailing efforts by multiple members of the NCC where they researched, pulled all 20 state bills and laws and read them and reviewed the language contained in each to determine that would be appropriate for New Hampshire. The proposed legislation was the culmination of the above research, where we selected the best of the best language from the bills for our proposed legislation. In particular, we highlighted West Virginia's language into our bill, as the West Virginia legislation has been ruled constitutional by a federal court. In addition, the NCC submitted to me court findings. 1, there are inherent differences between biological males and biological females, and that these differences are cause for celebration as determined by the Supreme Court of the United States in United States versus Virginia in 1996. 2, there are inherent differences are not a valid justification for sex-based classifications that make overboard generalization or perpetuate to be legal, social, and economic inferiority of either sex. Rather, these inherent differences are a valid justification for sex-based justifications when they realistically affect the fact that the sexes are not similarly situated in certain circumstances as recognized by the Supreme Court of the United States in Michael M. versus Sonoma County in 1981. In the context of sports involving competitive skill or contact, biological males and biological females are not, in fact, similarly situated. Biological males would displace females to a substantial extent if permitted to compete on these teams is designed for beneficial females, recognized in a case, Clark versus Arizona in 1982. Although necessarily related, was conducted by the United States Supreme Court, Bostock versus Clayton in 2020, gender identity as separate and distinct from biological sex to the extent that an individual's biological sex is not determinative or indicative of the individual's gender identity. Classifications based on gender identity serve to no legitimate relationship with the state of New Hampshire's interest in promoting equal athletic opportunities for the female sex. Courts have recognized the inherent biological differences between males and females and built in different athletic abilities. Kislak versus Rhode Island in 1992. Stephanie Spalding, a member of the NCC, contacted me and asked me if I would consider supporting the bill they had written. My answer was yes, as I know our biological females in New Hampshire need protection in safety and fairness in school sports from biological males participating in sports. Doing my own research, according to an NBC News report, approximately 70% of Americans do not want biological males in biological female sports. Another place I was reading was from the Alliance of Defending Freedom, and quote, this is a quote from the findings. Some of the given advantages of biological males over biological females, quote, greater weight and height and larger and longer and stronger bones to larger muscles and higher rates of metabolizing and releasing energy. These innate physiological traits result in greater muscle strength, stronger throwing, hitting, kicking, higher jumping, and faster running speeds for males, of which an athlete has an edge over females. With these traits, a biological male competing in sports has physical advantages and will continue to cause physical harm to female athletes. Our biological females deserve to play sports in a level playing field. We have biological females that work hard all through school in a sport that they love and compete in. Then, maybe, along comes a biological male who competes in this sport and wins. Where is the fairness? Fairness is without discrimination, and when a biological male is allowed to compete in a biological female sport, there is discrimination. But changes are taking place as the NXXT Women's Pro Golf Tour has banned biological males from competing in the women's sports in the leagues. At the NAIA's National Convention, the Council of Presidents determined that beginning August 1st, only students whose biological sex is female may compete in women's sports. I realize that the current administration in D.C. has updated the Title IX, and the policy changes, biological males will be able to be on a women's sports team, and there's nothing anybody can do. And this also hits all of education, or there's a chance you can use federal monies. This change, in my opinion, is radical, definitely not equitable, and is unacceptable. There are lawsuits in the making all over the country to fight in court the new Title IX policy that will take effect in August. My questions: why are there individuals that are against biological females as they treat the female and female sports as minute and unimportant? For example, in February, Representative Horrigan, referring to the NHIAA Indoor Track Field Championship held in Plymouth, dismissed the case of the biological male from Kearsarge competing in the girls' competition because it involves an, quote, obscure competition, unquote. That statement was extremely offensive and insulting to all biological females. Has anyone tried to come up with solutions like a transgender league of their own, or the fact that a transgender can be a member of a male sport, or a transgender might compete in a biological female team but are not competing with the biological females and are scored separately? Or maybe, as I was reading an article, Special Olympics celebrates the value of inclusion alongside the LGBTQ community. To me, there are solutions, and this bill is much needed for biological females, and I ask that you pass it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Senator Prentice.
Thank you. I have two questions, Senator Ward. I'll ask my first one, and then can I request a follow-up?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Representative. So the first thing I wanted to ask was on page, so good morning, thank you for taking my question. So on page, it would be page 1 of the bill, down in section 4, starting on line 25, it talks about if a birth certificate provided by a student, pursuant to, the definition in paragraph 3, does not have the student's original birth certificate, or does not appear to have the student's original birth certificate, or does not indicate the student's sex upon birth, then the student must provide other evidence indicating the student's sex at the time of birth. The student or the student's parents or guardians must pay the costs associated with providing the evidence required. So my first question for you is, what tests are we thinking of? What enforcement are we thinking of? It's not clear to me that if this isn't meant satisfactory, what discretion will be used to order specific exams or tests? I understand there's a provision in here for the cost, but have you put any thought into that?
Okay, the way I look at this in that section, every person has some type of identification in this day and age. It may be a birth certificate, or, we can't buy insurance, we can't buy anything, or we can't do anything unless we have identification. And I don't believe that section is a big deal, because I believe most people have some sort of identification at birth. I went for years without a birth certificate, and it's very easy to go and buy one, which is very cheap in price.
Follow up.
Well, so what you're saying is that if the birth certificate, that they don't have a birth certificate, or the birth certificate they have doesn't include the information that you're requiring here, as I read it in this bill, that they would, as I asked earlier, would be subject to testing. Do you have any thoughts or specifics on what kind of testing would meet the language, would meet this provision?
No, I would leave that up to the Department of if this bill passed with the Department of Education or someone along that line that is very knowledgeable in that area to come up with a simple way to do testing.
Follow up? Thank you. And just back to your opening testimony, and thank you for taking this question. Now, maybe I missed it, but you talked about the displacement of students, girls by biological males who are transgender, girls playing sports. Do we have any examples of cases in New Hampshire where there's been this type of displacement that you're referring to? You referred to some other states and states that have passed laws, but I'm just curious because the New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association is letting communities sort this out. So I'm wondering where has there been a problem?
Yes, there has been. Last year, I understand in Kearsarge Regional School District, a biological male competed in a sport and won. And this year, the NHIAA had state championships in Plymouth. And I think he came in second. I'm not sure. I wouldn't quote that. But what gets me, people are against this. I had a coach call me before this took place and asked me if there's anything I could do to stop the biological male from competing in the girls' sports. It's not fair. When you got girls are not stronger than males on the average. When you got girls competing and they spend their life going after scholarships in high school, et cetera, and a male comes along and just takes over, it's just not fair.
Follow up, a short one.
Short one, thank you. So back to my original question. Has any student been displaced from a team? Not from placing, getting a we can talk about scholarships separately, but has any student been displaced from a team by local policies related to biological sex, allowing transgender women to play women's sports?
Not that I know of.
Okay, thank you very much for taking my questions.
Okay.
I do. Thank
Senator
you.
Patton.
Thank you. And taking my question, I want to follow up on kind of what my colleague was talking about. How many students would this bill affect?
Excuse me. I didn't
How
hear.
many students would this bill affect?
How many students would this what?
How many students would
I
this
have a
bill-
hearing
No
problem.
problem. How many
Sorry.
students? How many students would this bill affect?
Grades what, 5 through 12? This doesn't affect kindergarten up into 5th grade. This is 5 through 12. Okay, the original bill was all school sports, included college, but the Education Committee made an amendment, and now it's only grades 5 through 12 in schools.
I guess follow up. Let me clarify. I guess how many transgender students are there currently?
I have been told it's about 2% statewide.
2%. Follow up.
Which one?
And how many of those students are playing in sports?
I don't have that answer.
Another follow-up, Madam Chair. So we have this bill in front of us. We have no idea how many transgender students there are, how many people are affected by this bill. And just one last question. You said a possible solution was a transgender league. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I mean, I believe if people discussed it, there could be a solution. It's not going to be perfect because nothing in life is ever perfect, but we go back to the same thing. Why is it fair for a biological male who is stronger than a biological female to be in their sport and win, and these girls have no chance of ever winning?
Just one clarification, but we have no idea how many students there are that this would affect, or how many transgender athletes are actually currently playing in sports. That's correct?
No, I don't have that information.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Stephen Boyce. Scares. Welcome.
Hello.
Morning.
Good morning, Chair and Senators. I'm here to speak in favor of this bill. I've raised 2 daughters in Nashua, and I want to use this time to respond to what I've heard about sports this year at different hearings. What is a girl? The definitions I've heard are based on stereotypes, someone who likes pink, or tautologies. For example, trans girls are girls. This bill recognizes that a girl is a human female. According to evolutionary biologist Colin Wright, a female is someone whose body is oriented towards reproducing with large gamete at some point, barring a disorder of sexual development. A girl isn't an estrogen level, a costume, or a gender identity. There are people with intersex conditions, but they comprise only 0.018% of the population, not 2%. They have nothing to do with males identifying as females. Although there are physiological differences among individuals, girls have a categorical disadvantage against boys in height, strength, and lung and heart capacity. This is why a team of boys 15 and under beat the U.S. national soccer team in scrimmage in 2017. Activists have repeatedly asked how we would enforce this bill without genital inspections. Much of what we do is on the honor system. The remote possibility that someone will cheat isn't a good reason to abandon girls' sports. We don't know how many girls are affected by this. We don't know how many girls are sharing locker rooms right now. But we do know that males are stealing women's spots on the podium, and a policy group that listed 578 victories, male victories in female sports, and that was a year ago. But even one is too many. Our policies shouldn't encourage boys to be subjected to what every systematic review of research, including the recently reduced CAS review in England, has determined to be dangerous experimental treatments.
One more minute.
They concluded that puberty blockers and hormones have no evidence of improving mental health or preventing suicide. Sweden warns that these treatments are potentially fraught with extensive and irreversible adverse consequences, such as cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, infertility, increased cancer risks, and thrombosis.
30 seconds left.
It isn't the responsibility of girls to sacrifice their own well-being to affirm boys' gender identities or to serve as their human shields. Please vote ought to pass on HB 1205.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. Someone said to me recently, if I had $1 for every gender there was, I'd have $2. The rest would be counterfeit. If we go all the way back to time when there was creation, what did God create? Male, and he created female. Now, if that's the case, would we be having this discussion now? If we truly believe that, would we be having this discussion about men playing in women's sports?
It's impossible to have a reasonable discussion about this because no one can define gender without relying on stereotypes or circular reasoning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Cordelli.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Ward and
3 minutes.
honorable senators. For the record, Glenn Cordelli, representing Tufton Borough, Wolfboro, and Ossipee in the beautiful Lakes region. And HB 1205 is really a bill about protecting fairness in women's sports. It's a women's rights issue. I just wanted to present some facts that have been in the press recently. Since 2020, 23 states have passed laws restricting transgender athletes' ability to participate in school sports in accordance with their gender identity as opposed to their sex. This is from ESPN last year. the World Athletics Council, the governing body for international track and field, and World Aquatics, and the International Cycling Union have enacted policies that bar transgender women from women's elite competition. The World Athletics Council decided to prioritize fairness and integrity of the female competitions as well. NIAI, Small College Athletics Association, has recently banned transgender athletes from women's sports competitions. According to a Gallup poll in 6/23, 69% of transgender athletes should only be allowed to compete on sports team that corresponds with the sex they were assigned to at birth. That's up from 62% in 2021. This is from the Sports Performance Bulletin. Here's a statement of facts, and I'm quoting. Male enjoy significant physical performance advantages over females within competitive sports. This is because sporting performance is strongly influenced by a range of physiological factors, including muscle force, power producing capacities, size characteristics, and etc. It goes
One more
on.
minute.
Thank you. It has been stated that there have been no injuries caused by transgender athletes competing against biological females. Not true. Massachusetts high school basketball team had to forfeit a game after a transgender player injured 3 players. That was earlier this year. And one other is a high school volleyball player suffered a concussion when she was spiked by a transgender athlete on the other team. And these are just a number of instances of articles that I pulled out recently from the press. So I think it is a safety issue as well as a fairness issue. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. And thank you, Representative Cordelli, for taking my question.
Sure.
So I'm just gonna, I've been thinking about this for a little bit. At the very end of your testimony, you cited some cases where students have been injured, saying that biological males who were competing as females had injured other females. But it strikes me that in women's sports or in men's sports, there are injuries that take place between each other. I remember, I wish I could remember exactly where, but my daughter wanted to play field hockey at one point, and the field hockey sticks always scared me because I saw, students, either accidentally or in one case intentionally hit another student. But are we going to now, is it better for us to be working on fairness within that particular sport than trying to ban somebody from playing it? Because it strikes me that, regardless of gender, that injuries within the way the sports teams are constructed right now are going to take place.
Yes, injuries take place in sports where there are biological sex athletes competing against the same biological sex, but those athletes recognize that. The difference here is the physical abilities and characteristics of the transgender females against biological females, where they have a significant advantage in most cases to the just biological female versus biological female. So I think that's the difference, is the physical nature that we're considering here with this legislation.
Okay, so follow up. So we're not going to address the construct as it is right now, just set a precedent for one particular situation, is what I'm hearing. Is that, are you?
Right. I think that
I'm low on coffee this morning, so help me out.
that's okay. I didn't have enough myself. I'm certainly against some of, for instance, professional football, some of the rule changes to prevent injuries and do away with some of the competitive aspects of the sports. Some places they want to outlaw in high schools, get rid of tackle football and have flag football, or get rid of dodgeball, for instance. I think is beyond what we need to do. We just really want to make sure that there's a fairness and safety issue because of the physical differences between transgender females and biological females.
Okay, thank you. Question?
Thank you,
Senator
Representative, and thank you for taking my question. I just want to follow up on some things you said. So this bill specifically says transgender girls cannot play on sports teams, correct?
I believe that's what the language is.
You talked to follow up, Madam Chair, and you talked about discrimination. How is that not discriminatory against this group of individuals?
I don't think I mentioned the word discrimination, but
I believe you did.
I did? Okay. Maybe it was in one of the articles. I think that what we have to go back to is the struggle that women went through to get the original Title IX in place back 50 years ago, so that they had more of a level playing field, both in education and in athletics. Title IX is not just athletics, it's education as well. So I think that that's very important. And there are other options. I think transgender females can certainly participate on the female athletic team. But I remember a testimony we had in House Education last term about a college athlete who said that they were gender neutral and that they could change their gender preference from week to week. So how do we deal with that kind of situation if we're basing our athletics on gender rather than sex?
One more follow up. Just want to follow up and clarify with the Title IX, because I agree on Title IX. And we heard from the previous speaker, the prime sponsor, about West Virginia. And 2 weeks ago, the West Virginia Supreme Court, Circuit of Appeals, heard this ban on transgender girls from playing sports, and it overrode it and said that offering a choice between not participating in sports and participating only on boys' teams is not a real choice at all. So it seems unconstitutional.
Well, that's a circuit court decision. We'll see. I'm sure that there's going to be one of these cases eventually that goes up to the Supreme Court. Let's see what they say. But there are cases around the nation. There are now lawsuits that have been filed by states against the new Title IX regulations that will be going into effect this summer. So there's always going to be legal cases involved in this.
Final follow-up, Representative. I appreciate you following along with me.
Sure.
Do you think if this bill were to pass, it would go to the courts?
I hesitate to predict on what's going to go to the courts and what's not, but it's a possibility, I would imagine,
Thank you for
based on
taking
other
the question.
lawsuits that we've seen filed in relation to education in the state.
Second time?
Please. Thank you for taking my question. During your testimony, you mentioned a court case. Can you take me back to that? Just so I didn't write it down. I was so intent on listening, I didn't write it down.
I don't see a court case in my
You mentioned a
testimony.
particular ruling. All right,
There have been several athletic bodies that have passed policies.
okay, I got that.
Yeah,
You didn't cite any case law.
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. I thought I heard it. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you. And again, remember, we're short on time, so hopefully your answers will be short.
Thank you.
Do you agree or disagree with the medical fact that post-pubescent, non-medicated males have a physiological advantage over biological females?
Agree.
A follow-up? Do you think that basic biological fact creates a fundamental inherent unfairness in competitive sports with biological female if biological unmedicated post-pubescent boys are allowed to play?
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative
Thank you.
Bailey. Now we have Representative Leisha Lekas. Remember, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Alicia Lekis, Hillsborough 38. And you have heard and will hear two basic sides to this. One arguing the physical advantages that biological males have over biological females, the competitions that have been lost, the medals that have been lost, etc., because biological males have competed against biological females. You'll also hear the flip side argument about how trans athletes just want to play sports. And I would argue that this bill allows for both of those things to happen, to protect women's sports, girls' sports, and to allow trans athletes to play sports. I grew up prior to Title IX. There were a lot of things I wasn't allowed to do, but it didn't keep me from playing sports. It just kept me from playing like Little League and things like that. But I wanted to play sports, so I organized sports in our school. We had a mixed gender volleyball competition all across. We had quite a few teams. I played with them. I was a great server. I caused probably more points than anybody else in the school, but I was hopeless and afraid of the ball. And I had the two best boys on each side of me, and my job was to get out of the way. Unless the ball was coming straight at me, and then hit it straight up and get out of the way. So, it doesn't say, well, it doesn't say anything about trans anyways, but it says the third one is co-ed or mixed on line 14. And that's the
One
thing.
more minute.
Okay, thank you. With all of the people that have come for this hearing and the ones that we've had in front of the House, if all of those people got motivated and decided to just have more sports, co-ed sports, then everybody would be able to participate. Nobody would be turned away. There wouldn't be nobody would miss out on all of the good things that you get from playing sports. And at the same time, girls do not have to compete against males that are bigger, stronger, and faster. That's it.
Thank you. Questions? Nope.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Christine Perez.
Thank you. Representative Christine Perez, Rockingham 16. Just a couple of things I want to bring up. There's no place in here that says that there has to be any testing for to prove your sex. It just says that they must provide evidence. So it doesn't say testing. And another thing is I drive up here all the time and there's that big sign that says 24 automobile deaths in the state. One is too many. This is a preventative thing. One problem, one child, one person getting hurt is too many. So, in my opinion, the thing that I'm going to talk about hockey because I have family members that have played in hockey. Hockey under the age of 13 is very co-ed. Very co-ed. You can go to anywhere around New Hampshire and it's very co-ed. But at age 13, they're allowed to check. So therefore, girls leave hockey and play in girls hockey. I have a friend whose daughter was 12 and played in boys hockey and was checked and by a boy who was 12 because they could still do that, and he checked her against the boards and broke her clavicle. So there is a biological difference. As far as schools are concerned and sports, safety is a huge issue. Every single sport that is played has safety behind it. Safety, safety. You can't, I think it's in field hockey, you can't hit a ball one way, you can only hit it this way. Safety is behind every single thing. This bill is about the safety, and we are talking about children. Safety of children
One more minute.
in sports. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Oh, I have a
Wait a minute.
question.
Oh, sorry.
Question.
Thank you
Senator
very
Prentice.
Thank you very much, Representative Perez, and for taking my question. And I think the one place that we'll agree, I mean, my entire career has been about safety, either prevention or taking care of those who have been injured. But here's the thing. You said this bill does not require any type of testing. And I'm not a physician, but I've, again, spent a lot of time working in the medical field. When I look at the analysis, it talks about, designating athletes by sex and prohibits biological. So it uses the word biological. And then I get to this provision where we may have a disagreement, but I'm interested in how you want to try to resolve this disagreement. If a birth certificate, if they don't have it, or it doesn't contain the information that is needed to be on one team or the other, how do we get to evidence when we're talking about biological? Because biological is normally associated with, that physical person. So that's where I think we're looking at some type of medical testing. So that's my I don't want to use the word my read on this. So you see it differently. Can you help me understand how we're going to get to this if we're talking about biology?
Sure. I was an intensive care and ER nurse for 42 years, okay? We needed to know when someone came in whether they were biological male or biological female, because testing levels are different. Levels of lab tests are different. The amount of things that perhaps a medication given to a person are different. So therefore, you needed to know their birth sex. So therefore, what I would do is I would say to that person, when you were born, were you a biological male or a biological female? That's what I would do. There are differences. I've had differences since the day I went to nursing school. Things have changed. That was in the 60s. Women were not allowed to put catheters in males. Things have changed. I understand. But the bottom line, you ask them, what is your biological, not your gender, your biological sex? That's how I would resolve that.
Follow up?
Thank you, Representative Perez. And I actually think you just almost made my case for me that there is different. So, and thank you for working in emergency medicine and in the intensive care unit. It's really important. But you just talked about, you would ask them, yes, but you also identified that there are different ways, different testing to confirm.
No, that's
Well,
not.
you said there would be different tests that would be. Take me back to different, ordering different
Okay.
tests. Or
No,
different
I wasn't saying ordering. Lab, different values.
Okay,
Values.
but those values, to get those values, there's testing that's involved.
Well, I understand that. So, example, if you had an emergency room patient come in, and you needed to get something as simple as their complete, blood count, it's different for a man. The results are different for a man than they are for a woman. I mean, just your red blood cell levels, you have for women and for men. So I'm not saying that I would have to do tests to determine what their biological sex is. I would have to be aware of a biological sex in order to evaluate the lab values that were returned to me.
Thank
Does that
you.
make sense?
Yes, I'm just still not 100% clear how we're going to gather, evidence. this word evidence on if, to prove sex, male or female. I do appreciate.
And I understand your concern about that, but I guess, what is your biological sex would be my first question if you were signing up for a sport. And if you chose not to give that to me, and I think if you really want to participate in that sport, you would give that answer. So I trust humanity. So thank you.
Question? Thank you very much. Representative Ladd.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Education Committee. Rick Ladd for the record, and I support this bill. It's about fairness, women's rights, and safety of all athletes participating. I'm going to take a little bit of my time to speak as a father. As a father of athletes, one of my daughters went on and ran for Texas A&M Division I school, full scholarship. My granddaughter, captain of the indoor and outdoor track teams, University of Maine, had experiences dealing with this issue, and I'd like to speak to that. Growing up with these children that I had, my sons, others are playing basketball right now, one at St. Lawrence University and another played point guard at Elmira College. Growing up, there's a lot of challenges facing every athlete. They have a lot of drive. They care. They have belief in themselves, and they think the world is fair. Then they get into a situation such as the girl from Maine did when she lost to a transgender that was running in the same race she was in the regional cross-country conclusion at the end of the year. And I'll just read one thing that she said. Her last name was William, and this was in the news. William said she knew second place would be her best possible finish this year. Because as you probably know, there's a runner that identifies as female. And they were running the boys' race last year, and they decided to run the girls' race this year. And it's very upsetting to me because I'm working my butt off to get where I am this year. Williams added, I want to say I'm totally supportive with everyone being whoever they want to be, but I feel like when you put people born male in girls' races, it's just genetically unfair. My own granddaughter saw that when she ran at Dartmouth College, and she ended up running against the transgender person who was national champion for Division II schools in this country. They were beat by a little distance from here to there. And my daughter also is extremely capable athlete and won a number of races at BC, Northeastern, etc. However, this race that she ran in, there was no chance. She was physically not built the same way that this other person was. So that's an experience that, and that particular person who won that race was banned from the Olympic trials because of an issue. So I'd like to also speak to why we don't incorporate in this bill collegiate and university level athletics. There's a growing urgency of the matter of transgender athletes in NCAA right now. This effort has led to the filing of a lawsuit against the NCAA on March 14th of this year by 16 former and current NCAA athletes, including former University of Kentucky swimmer turned anti-trans activist Riley Gaines. The NCAA's deliberation also comes amidst the ban put in place by the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, NAIA. That occurred on April 9 of this year. Officials for organizations cited equity and fairness and the need to work this out further. And I've also talked with the folks at the University of New Hampshire, and they also recognize before we go any further in this has to be a policy decision made at the university collegiate level, because they're competing nationwide, whereas in the state, we're competing statewide for our high school kids. We can control that, but we can't control running against University of Oregon or Texas, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. No questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Representative Selig?
Good morning, and thank you for hearing from me. My name is Lauren Selig. I am the representative from Durham, New Hampshire, which is Stratford District 10. I am also a former school teacher. I taught for a dozen years, and I also am the parent of two, I guess, as the people who testified before me would say, biological females. My girls both played team sports. There have been a lot of allegations that if trans girls play, it will give them an unfair advantage, or that trans kids will somehow behave inappropriately in a bathroom or some such thing. My older daughter played pee-wee soccer with a trans child. She also took a soccer ball to the face in a direct hit that ended her desire to ever play soccer again. The person who kicked the ball was not the trans child who also had ADD and was roaming around the fields in random places. It was a cisgender kiddo who grew up to play varsity soccer before she left for college. Both my girls also swam on our swim team. They competed against and usually lost to cisgender girls who were a full foot taller than them. Their advantage was height, not gender. In the locker room, all the girls changed in the toilet stalls. If they showered first, they still did so in their swimsuits because they all thought being naked in front of anyone was just weird. Plus, it got the chlorine off their swimsuits. We've heard that trans kids are more likely to cause injuries to others. I will tell you that my younger daughter has gotten more than one concussion in her time playing basketball and in cheerleading. In none of the cases was it a trans girl who injured her. In fact, in every case, it was a cisgender girl who injured her. Sports have inherent dangers. It's why parents are asked to sign releases when kids play sports. Finally, I can tell you that while I've been sexually harassed and assaulted in my life, including in women's rooms, it has never once been by someone who is transgender. It has been by a heterosexual male asserting his power. And a heterosexual man who pretends to be trans to get into a women's room is not trans. They are not a trans woman. They are a jerk and possibly a criminal. Earlier, the sponsor said that fairness is participation without discrimination. But this bill is discriminatory and hurtful, and I implore you to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none.
Oh,
Did you have? Okay, Senator Prentice.
thank you, Senator Ward, and thank you, Representative, for taking my question. I think you've been sitting in the room for a little bit.
Yes.
Okay. Have you heard my questioning, at least two that have testified about how to provide evidence of biological sex? I'm just looking for a little help here, because to me, evidence means some type of testing. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, short of pulling someone's pants down, which I'm pretty sure is illegal and would be considered harassment, I can't think of any other way of verifying someone's gender. I will say that as I've been going through the menopause process, being a woman of a certain age, I had a gynecologist tell me that as my body stopped producing estrogen, I'd stop being a woman. I'm pretty sure that's not how it works. I do know that children, and I know a number of them who take puberty blockers in order to delay the onset of puberty, whether it is for the purposes of transitioning or whether it is, as in the case of one child who began puberty at 8 years old, trying to delay it to a more appropriate age. It prevents their bodies from developing these characteristics in some cases that other people have described. But I can't think of anything. I do know that one of our students at one of my daughter's high school classmates just broke a school record for the 2-mile race. I've known her since birth. As far as I'm aware, she's always been a girl. And she is outrunning all the boys on the team on a regular basis because she happens to be naturally gifted and really, really fast.
Thank you for taking my question.
Thank you. Senator Fenton.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. You've been a teacher, you said.
Yes.
And I want to follow up on kind of what my colleague was talking about. You said, short of pulling down their pants to verify, their sex or gender, who would be doing this? It doesn't say. I mean, are we talking about teachers verifying this, coaches verifying this?
I don't know the answer to that either, Senator, and it horrifies me. The idea that we are expecting people to verify one's gender, and just as I would not presume to know anyone's gender in this room, and I would trust that the gender that they told me was their gender, I don't know of a way to tell. I can relay the joke that my college chemistry professor told regularly, which is, how do you tell boy DNA from girl DNA? You pull down their genes. But literally without doing genetic testing, which I don't believe schools are qualified or certified to do, I don't believe there's any way.
Thank you.
And I also don't know what happens for kids who were born intersex.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Parker Terrell.
Good morning. My name is Parker Terrell. I'm a 15-year-old freshman at Plymouth Regional High School. Like many teenagers, I have a loving family. I enjoy spending time with my friends and playing video games. However, there's a key part of who I am that I want to share with you. I'm transgender. I'm here today to express my deep concern regarding HB 1205 and similar legislative efforts aimed at barring transgender students like me from participating in sports. Despite being a regular teenager with a passion for soccer, I find myself facing the clear threat of exclusion simply because of who I am. Let me be clear, I am not a physical threat to my peers on the field, nor do I seek any unfair advantage by playing on a girls' sports team. I play soccer because I love the sport, the camaraderie, and the opportunity to grow as an athlete. Joking with my teammates, kicking the ball around during warm-ups, hearing our coach loudly encourage us from the sidelines are things I love about being on a soccer team. It is disheartening to see lawmakers pushing for discriminatory measures without taking the time to understand the real impact on students like me. Why is my safety any less important than that of my peers? Claims that I should play on a team based on my assigned gender at birth completely disregard very real risks I would face on a boys' soccer team. It is not just about the risks. I can't play on a boys' team because I am not a boy. I am a girl. My safety, well-being, and sense of belonging matter just as much as anyone else's. I am fortunate to have the support of my family, friends, and teammates and coach and school community, as well as countless athletes across the state who recognize the importance of an inclusion and acceptance. I urge you to not be swayed by the discriminatory rhetoric, but to stand on the right side of history, supporting all students regardless of their gender in pursuing their passions and dreams. Also, another thing I would like to add is I have heard a lot of people say something about it being regarding safety of transgender students injuring other students. In that basketball game, the girls that were injured were not injured by the transgender student. One of the athletes that were injured was injured by the transgender student. The other two, it was not the transgender student that did that injury. Also, I had a soccer game on Sunday, and I'm a transgender athlete.
1 minute left.
Yes, and I got injured. No one else on the team was injured. And I would also like to add, if we are worried about spots on teams getting filled up or student opportunities for other girls, we had one sub. Like, I wasn't taking an opportunity from any other girl. It was, if anything, we could have used more people. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Sarah Terrell. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members. My name is Sarah Terrell, and I reside in Plymouth, New Hampshire, as part of District 5. And I come before you today to advocate for a marginalized minority and urge you to vote ITL on HB 1205. As the parent of a transgender athlete, let's all give her a round of applause for coming up here to speak with you today. My journey has been one of both challenges and triumphs. From a tender age, it became apparent that our youngest child did not conform to traditional gender norms. In embracing Parker's journey of self-discovery, we supported her exploration of gender fluidity, which culminated in her coming out as a trans girl at the age of 13. Athletics has played a pivotal role in Parker's life, providing solace and support and a sense of belonging amidst a tumultuous teenage years. While navigating the intricacies of her first year of high school, Parker's soccer team has been a steadfast source of camaraderie and support. Contrary to misconceptions, Parker's participation in girls' soccer is not about dominance, but rather about her passion for the sport and the acceptance it offers her in a society often predisposed to marginalize her. Her journey as a transgender athlete has been marked by resilience, patience, and a gradual progress guided by years of careful consultation with therapists and specialists. The reality of being a transgender teenager is not devoid of hardship. Recently, Parker had an upsetting interaction with a former classmate. This student joined an online game with her, and upon realizing who she is, called her a, insert expletive, ugly tranny who should go kill herself. I held my sobbing, broken daughter that in the middle of the night as she cried and told me she didn't want to be this way. I did my best to put her back together that night while I continued to witness the erosion of her sense of freedom in our live free or die state. I know I'm not alone in this experience. There are many families of trans kids who experience similar interactions every day. Proponents of HB 1205 argue that it aims to safeguard the safety and fairness of biologically female students. However, if safety is the primary concern, there are countless measures, such as funding athletic trainers and enhancing coach and referee training, that can address broader safety needs and of all athletes. Let me be clear, HB 1205 will not change the safety of student athletes. Similarly, claims of fairness are unfounded, as evidenced by the absence of transgender athletes receiving college scholarships and the equitable composition of high school teams. Spending disproportionate amount of time and resources on excluding a mere 0.5% nationally. I get this from the Keene Sentinel, who recently published an article. 0.5% of student athletes identify as transgender. This detracts from the genuine issues of safety and fairness for all. In conclusion, I urge you to vote ITL and HB 1205. Let's prioritize inclusivity, compassion, and the fundamental principles of safety and fairness in our educational institutions. Thank you for
very
your
much.
time.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anne Marie Banfield.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Anne Marie Banfield, parental rights advocate in New Hampshire. I'm just going to start with just a couple points. I played volleyball in middle school on a girls' team, and I am so grateful that I didn't have to play against any boys because those girls can spike the ball pretty tough. I also played softball when I got older, and played on a women's girls' team. It was recreational; it wasn't collegiate level. But I also joined a co-ed team because I was pretty darn good. That didn't last long because I didn't want to get my teeth knocked out. To be quite frank, those balls coming from the bats were quite different coming from males than they were from females. Why does it seem like we always have to wait for somebody to get injured before we do something? And by the way, talked to a parent from the Lowell Charter School, KIPP Academy down in Lowell, Mass yesterday. And there were 3 players that were injured in that game, and the remaining players didn't want to continue on because they feared for the injury. And yes, if you watch the video, it is the trans student throwing the girls to the ground. In Title IX, we made great strides, females, women, and I feel like we're just going backwards now. We're just going backwards. They're losing their scholarships, they're losing their awards. And I just can't believe in 2024, we're fighting for the basic rights of women and girls to play sports fairly, to have privacy in a locker room, to have privacy in their bathroom. I feel like we're going back to the 1950s, 1940s, where, we were marginalized. And now that we have made these great strides, this is going backwards. We've done this. Why are we even, I don't even believe that this is being debated anymore. I think that's all I wanted to mention. I didn't want to take up more of your time, but I appreciate you taking my testimony.
Thank you very much. Questions? Senator Lang?
Thank you, Anne Marie, for taking my question. Do you agree or disagree with the basic medical fact that post-pubescent, non-medicated males have a physiological advantage over biological females?
Absolutely. I saw it on the softball team.
Do you agree?
Yes.
Do you think that basic medical fact creates a fundamental inherent unfairness in competitive sports against biological women?
Absolutely. I saw it myself.
Thank you.
Any others? Thank you very much. Now we have Moelle Jacques.
Good morning, Senate Education Committee. My name is Maëlle Jacques, a 16-year-old girl from Newbury, and I'm here to testify in opposition of HB 1205. Throughout my entire life, sports have been an integral part to my sense of belonging. I've been playing soccer since the age of 3. Today, I play soccer and track and field teams at Kearsarge Regional High School, as well as Lightning SC in the springtime. When I began my transition in the 6th grade, my school welcomed me onto the girls' teams. Being able to play on the teams I belong to allowed me to skip through the phase of social ostracization as the other girls accepted me for who I was, welcomed especially by the locker room rituals when we go around and give a word of how we wanted to perform that game. Being a part of a team allowed me to be seen as normal, where everywhere else I was always perceived as a pariah. In the locker rooms, I'm just a girl who needs to change into my sports uniforms like anyone else, who wants to take the space to bond with my team and after games to talk about our days and to do each other's hair. And more importantly, to prepare for the upcoming practice or game. I didn't join sports with the goal of dominating the competition or being better than anyone else. No one would go through the bullying and self-hatred of transition purely to win a sport, especially women's sports, which are underappreciated in our nation. If banned from teams and locker rooms, joining the male teams wouldn't even be a choice for me with the bullying and threats I'd receive, let alone the mental anguish I'd go through being forced to be someone I'm not. Thank you for your consideration and please vote in opposition to HB 1205. Sincerely, Mael Jacques.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much. Representative Hope Damon.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. I am Representative Hope Damon, Sullivan District 8, half of Senator Ward's district. I serve on House Education Committee. I am the mom of 2 adult daughters, and now I'm a grandmom. I am here to vigorously oppose House Bill 1205 and to ask you to please lead New Hampshire with compassion. One of the things I repeatedly said as I campaigned for office 2 years ago was that I would bring my voice of kindness to the State House. And that is why I'm here speaking today. We need to be kind and respectful of all people. We must also maintain our full compliance with Title IX, the Constitution, and all civil rights laws. Testimony before House Education Committee on this bill affirmed these basic facts. 1, trans girls are girls. They are not adult males in drag. 2, it is a lengthy and complex process to identify as a trans girl. It is a completely unrealistic fear that males who are not trans will casually decide to pretend they are trans so as to play on girls' sports teams. The bullying they would take would sufficiently end that. Further, we can trust our school coaches and athletic directors to know who their students are. 3, this bill is not about protecting girls. We all know there are injury risks in all sports. The perception of trans girls as larger, stronger, and bulkier than biological girls is not evidenced in fact, and we should be making legislation based on fact. We know in sports there are winners and there are losers, and it is actually a good part of life learning to lose and figure out how you go forward. So whoever wins, whether the trans girl who is just a girl prevails or someone else does, we're all learning. This bill is harmful to all kids, not only the trans girls. Students know that sports are far more about socialization, learning teamwork, and life skills, like communication, than winning. This bill is another bite into the reasonable, normal pursuit of happiness of trans kids and all kids.
1 more minute.
Thank you. I remind you that this bill was unanimously ITL'd 3 years ago and urge you to maintain our New Hampshire Live Free and Die motto by respecting the civil rights of all. We should be collaborative in opposing the attempted extermination of minorities. Please ITL this bill and let's move on to more productive legislation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you. Chris Ershaw?
Thank you, Chair Ward, members of the committee. My name's Chris Urchel. I am a New Hampshire licensed attorney, and I'm here on behalf of GLAD. You all know GLAD's position on this issue because I've talked to each of you extensively. I would like to use my time to focus on new legal developments in the last couple of weeks that are highly relevant to why this bill must not become law. First, however, I want to tell you that the number of transgender athletes with athletic scholarships is 0, despite what you might hear. And there's absolutely no research to support the claim that transgender girls pose a risk to the safety of other student athletes. If I had time, I would explain why the anecdotes that you hear so frequently, like the Massachusetts basketball forfeiture or the reported volleyball injury, are devoid of important context. I'm happy to discuss more if there are questions. The bill sponsor sat before you this morning and said that the West Virginia law excluding transgender girls from girls' sports was a model for this bill, and that law was found by a court to be valid. Apparently, she is ignorant of the fact that, as Senator Fenton said 11 days ago, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed that federal court decision and invalidated the West Virginia sports ban. For those who don't know, the Fourth Circuit is the appeals court covering North and South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland. The decision in BPJ versus West Virginia is highly relevant to this committee's consideration of this bill. The decision looked carefully at Supreme Court precedent in Bostock versus Clayton County, which held that Title VII prohibits workplace discrimination against transgender employees because it's inarguably discrimination based on sex. Then the court examined the text of Title IX, which is the federal law that prohibits discrimination in education. The result was inescapable that categorically excluding transgender girls from girls' sports teams is a violation of the plain text of Title IX because it denies essential educational opportunities to transgender students. This court decision is unsurprising because it tracks with what other courts have said nationwide. I'm happy to answer questions about other cases. Another development about 2 weeks ago, the United States Department of Education released new Title IX final rule that makes crystal clear that discrimination against transgender students is sex discrimination and violates Title IX, subjecting schools to potential loss of federal funding. The rule did not address sports directly, but did indicate that the final sports rule is forthcoming, consistent with the proposed guidance that was released about 6 months ago.
30 seconds left.
That proposed guidance made it clear that categorical bans on transgender participation in sports is unequivocally a violation of Title IX. New Hampshire public schools are already asked to do more and more without sufficient resources. They cannot risk losing important federal dollars for failing to comply with Title IX. Fairness requires this legislature to reject this bill. Please vote ITL. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. Have you been in the room for a good portion this morning? So I've been asking this question repeatedly about evidence and birth certificates. If there isn't a birth certificate that either meets the requirement that has the listing of biological sex or the absence of a birth certificate to provide as evidence to the school. It talks in here, again, about the word evidence and paying costs associated with providing evidence. Thank you for taking my question. What do you think so has your experience been in looking at case law throughout the country? Have you seen this before? Or legislation, I should say, not case law. Have you seen this before? And what evidence are we talking about?
Yes. So, yes, thank you so much for the question. I think the easiest way to think about this question is to propose a hypothetical. There is a girl who has signed up for the girls' sports team. She shows up. She has a birth certificate that says she's a girl. A New Hampshire student, whether or not she's transgender, can have a birth certificate that says she's a girl. That doesn't give any other indication what her birth sex may have been. And so a girl's on the sports team. She has a birth certificate that says she's a girl. She asserts that she's a girl. And then some other student or that student's parent makes a complaint to the school and says, I don't believe that that's a girl. I believe she's a transgender girl. I believe the law says that she can't play sports. What happens then? Then it's not clear what exactly happens, what the order of operations is. It doesn't lay it out in the text of the bill. But in theory, there must be some manner by which that student is confronted and asked for additional evidence to prove that she's a girl. What is additional evidence? I think that you're asking a really important question. I don't know what that would look like. How do you prove that you're a girl other than by subjecting yourself to some sort of physical examination? So, and this can affect a girl who's transgender or a girl who's not transgender, as long as she's being challenged for her, for her gender. And in fact, there's one court case that actually discussed this issue of how and what invasive policies there are to determine somebody's natal sex. In that case is Hecox versus Little, which is the case that involved the sports ban out of Idaho. And I'll just leave it at that and say that that's like a real important consideration for how this might play out in real life for some students.
Madam Chair.
Senator Fenton.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. You've been in the room. We heard from one of the representatives about some court cases. Could you elaborate on those?
Thank you for the question. Yes. So the Fourth Circuit decision is the first decision from an appeals court that reviewed a final decision on the merits from a trial court. And so that decision just 10 days ago found, and it's, a final ruling that's of course subject to a Supreme Court, cert request, but it's unlikely that the Supreme Court takes any case. So anyway, that decision is now the most prominent and important decision. And of course, it's not binding precedent in New Hampshire, but it is really indicative of where courts are going. Another really important court decision is out of the Ninth Circuit from the Idaho case that I mentioned just a little bit ago, Hecox versus Little. That decision was on a preliminary injunction, so that case hadn't gone through all of the various levels of elaborate trial proceedings. However, that court decision is binding on the Ninth Circuit, and it says that it's just categorical ban on transgender students playing in school sports violate Title IX and the U.S. Constitution. There are other cases as well that follow the same outcome, including state law cases out of Montana and Utah that say that their state constitutions prohibit bans on transgender students playing in sports. There was a case out of Indiana where there was a preliminary injunction, and then the plaintiffs had to drop the case because the student graduated. And so that law went back into effect, unfortunately. The only court decision that has fallen on the other side of this and has not been overturned is one decision out of Florida where a challenge was brought to the Florida ban on transgender students playing sports. And a federal district court judge dismissed that case, and that decision has not been appealed. Otherwise, courts have been pretty unanimous in understanding that there's no way to talk about sex discrimination under Title IX that doesn't protect the right of transgender students to play sports.
Quick follow-up. So just to clarify, and in my research as well, it seems like when a state passes language like this, the court almost unanimously overturns it.
Correct. I would just, add the caveat that even the Fourth Circuit decision had a dissent, so not all judges speak with one voice on the matter, but the overwhelming authority has gone on the side of saying that these laws are invalid.
Thank you.
Senator Lang.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, Madam Chair. So I think in your testimony, you said that no scholarship should be an issue being given to trans females at this point.
I said 0 scholarships have been
Zero
given.
scholarships.
There was one scholarship that was offered to a student that some people claim was transgender, although there's no evidence to support that claim that anyone has been able to point to. Maybe the student is, but she hasn't said so herself, and she did not accept that scholarship.
So again, in December of 23, the University of Washington issued a
That's what I was talking
D1
about.
scholarship to a transgender student that came out as transgender.
I don't believe she's come out as transgender.
Okay, that wasn't the article. That wasn't the information I read. But so there was one offered. The question is whether or not they were transgender or not. So my second question, follow-up, Madam Chair. You regularly use sex and gender synonymously and interchangeable. Is it your understanding that biological sex is the same exact thing as gender identity?
Legally, the words gender and sex are used pretty interchangeably. There's context, to add to that as far as the depth of your question. Do you care to be more specific about what you're asking me?
Well, again, you're the one that made the statement. You were using gender and sex interchangeably.
Yes, and the law treats the words gender and sex equivalently.
And are you aware that in the medical field that's not done? That sex and gender, especially when dealing with studies on different principles, that doctors are informed to understand that sex is biological sex, gender is gender identity, and they can use the two, but they're not interchangeable.
Thank you for the question. So I'm not a medical professional, and I don't purport to be, and I don't. I do work in healthcare for transgender people, but I don't work in medicine more broadly. However, I would like to pose the hypothetical situation in which a transgender woman goes to see an oncologist to assess her cancer risk. A transgender woman might have a prostate and might have an equivalent risk of prostate cancer to any natal male, and so therefore, biologically, for the purposes of that examination, she might be considered a man, or she might be considered equivalent at risk for cancer to a man. At the same time, that same woman could walk in to get a screening for breast cancer, or her risk for breast cancer, and her risk would be equivalent to that of a biological woman. And so therefore, for the purposes of that examination, she would be equivalent to a biological woman. So I don't think that the question is as simple as you just posited. I think it's a little bit more complicated depending on the specifics of the circumstances, and medical professionals are well equipped to deal with questions regarding the health of transgender people.
Final question. Yep. So same question I've been asking everybody. Do you agree or disagree with the basic medical fact that post-pubescent non-medicated males have a physiological advantage over biological females? You agree with that medical principle at all?
Well, the New York Times just recently published or just recently released a story about a study that kind of examined the performance of transgender athletes in sports, right? Because this bill isn't about post-pubescent biological male athletes. This bill is about transgender students, right? It excludes all transgender students from being able to play on school sports teams, all transgender girls. And so the report that the New York Times wrote this article about basically said that there's mixed outcomes when you ask the question of whether transgender athletes tend to perform better or worse than other female athletes. And so I think that the question is irrelevant to consideration of the bill. The bill is not about excluding all biological post-pubescent males from being able to play on girls' sports teams, even though that's what the text does. It is effectively excluding transgender girls, and transgender girls are the people I'm here to talk about today.
So I'm not sure you answered my question. No, I'm still trying to, do you agree with the basic medical science that says that biological males, post-pubescent, non-medicated, have a physiological advantage? Do you disagree with that supposition in medicine?
I don't disagree with that supposition. I also don't think that the bill addresses that question at all.
So as a follow-up, given that basic fundamental, do you think that if you had a post-pubescent, non-medicated male playing in a woman's sport, it would create a fundamental unfairness?
So this raises an important question about why sports are a part of educational why sports are part of educational programming in the first instance. The reason is because sports, as we all know, impart essential life lessons, including lessons about how to be a leader, how to cooperate and share camaraderie with your teammates, self-discipline, and other essential skills that you cannot learn in any other way than participating in school sports. That's why these opportunities are essential to everybody, and that's why it's only fair to make sure that the opportunities are available to every student, including transgender students.
Follow up again? Sorry. So again, would you agree that all of those things you said that students learn are equally learned on boys' teams versus girls' teams?
If you're suggesting that for a transgender girl, that those opportunities are the same on a girl's team or a boys' team, the answer is no.
That wasn't my question. My
Yes,
question
boys
was
can
leadership and all those things you cited.
Yes.
They occur on a boys' team and they occur on a boys'
correct.
team.
Boys
Is that
can
a fair statement?
boys can learn those skills on boys' teams. Girls can learn those skills on girls' teams. Correct.
Great. And the last thing, can you tell me anywhere in this bill we talk about gender? And we just talk about biological sex? Or is the word gender in here or transgender in this bill anywhere?
I would just answer that by saying the bill indisputably excludes transgender girls from being able to play on girls' sports teams. You cannot argue otherwise. I know you wouldn't argue otherwise.
No, I'm not arguing otherwise. Again, but the statement is it doesn't ban them from playing sports as a whole.
It bans them from girls' sports teams. And as the Fourth Circuit said in BPJ, and which Senator Fenton eloquently quoted earlier, giving transgender girls the option to play on boys' team is no option at all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric Cole Johnson. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson and committee members. My name's Eric Cole Johnson. I'd like to thank you for your attention this morning. My wife and I have lived in this wonderful state for 30 years. Feel lucky to call it home, even between Mother's Day and Father's Day. I'm thinking back to a week my wife and I spent with our daughter. In some ways, it was unremarkable. We did jigsaw puzzles, watched soccer matches, bad movies, played video games, tried to learn this little toy Kadama. But in other ways, it was quite different. At least one of us was by our daughter's side 24 hours a day. A nurse or doctor came in the room to check on her regularly. The bright fluorescent lights were always on in the hallway. They brought us food. We couldn't taste it. And we hugged her more than usual, as much as possible, in fact, although she didn't always want to be hugged. Then an ambulance took her away from the ER after a bed finally opened up at a facility that could better help with her needs. She was depressed. She was suicidal. She didn't want to be a burden. I'm here in opposition to HB 1205 and ask you to please not recommend its passage. Our daughter's doing much better now. She's been competing on the girls' team for cross-country running and Nordic skiing. Despite my nervousness about it, could she handle it? Perhaps she could wait till next year. She wanted to go for it. After that first cross-country race, I wondered, did it feel uncomfortable? No, she said. It felt good. It felt right. In New Hampshire, we value liberty, autonomy, freedom, opportunity. We welcome all sorts of people to our state as tourists and as residents. You can start a business here. You can ski the best groomed snow in New England. You can get a great education. Let's be known as a state that also stands up for the rights of everybody to prosper and flourish. And everybody includes trans girls. And prospering and flourishing includes being able to compete in sports that align with their gender identity. No, it wasn't how things were when we were growing up, but times change. Our understanding of the human experience broadens. My daughter's not a boogeyman. My daughter's not a threat. Transgender girls are not a threat. Let's not force them to either quit the sport they love competing in, one that fills them with joy and life, or join the boys' team. They're living their lives as girls in all other respects. They are girls. Yes, it can be hard for us cisgender folks to get this point, but the more trans folks we get to know, the more we understand this. So I put them with the boys when they won't fit in, where they'll likely be bullied. Our daughter didn't win that race. In fact, she placed halfway through the pack. She wasn't heckled. No parents gave dirty looks. She did not knock other girls to the ground. She did not take away athletic scholarships. Athletic directors were not called by angry parents. Fellow competitors fist bumped with her after the finish line. She cheered on her remaining teammates, and she smiled. HB 1205 would allow parents and athletes suspecting a competitor of being a transgender girl to accuse her and her team of the fact and force her to come up with a birth certificate to prove she was assigned female at birth. Is this really the type of environment we want in New Hampshire? I hope not. For my daughter and for all trans girls who just want to be themselves and for whom part of that is playing their sport. Our daughter is not a burden to us. In fact, she is an inspiration. We think she is courageous and strong, but she wouldn't say so. She's just trying to be herself, to be the girl she is, a girl who loves to race. Please let all girls play and block HB 1205. Thank you much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Ward and other senators here on the committee. I'm sorry we're not all still here. I made 5 copies this last time, identical testimony except for the number of the bill because this is now the House bill. I just sent it by email, so I'm not going to address each section because I don't have time for that. And I have not been in the room for all of the testimony, but I have been for some, and I want to call your attention to the fact that this does not say a word about intersex individuals. It's a very difficult subject. Oh, by the way, I am a medical physician as well as a transgender woman. And you really need to think about that. People with identical medical conditions might have opposite birth certificate notations of sex. So you need to think about what are the implications of that, because people often don't feel that the sex that was assigned to them is right if they are intersex. Difficult issue. And I'm going to try to address Senator Lang's issue about the biology of this a little bit too. You know, there isn't absolute separation of sex and gender in medical literature that I know of. And the question really is not that. It's a question really of fairness, and it's a question of, is there a danger to people? There's a danger in sports, especially the contact and collision sports. I was a soccer player, and I played pickup basketball beyond 10 years past when I no longer had any male hormones. I was not as fast, I was not as strong, and I remember getting injured by a biological male. Actually, that was a year after stopping all hormones. I'd been on a little bit of female hormones to protect my bones, and decided at age 60 that that wasn't necessarily the best thing. Okay, so I think, you know, this is a fraught subject, and while I prefer to see this bill ITO'd, maybe a study committee is worthwhile. I have only recently become aware that one of the track stars in Connecticut was not on hormones of any sort, and that's problematic, I think, and I understand that. And it's also a little problematic that Leah Thomas went through full male puberty and was a very strong racer. On the other hand, Leah Thomas also had transitioned and was losing some of her speed. Some of their speed. I'm not even sure what pronouns Leah uses, so her speed I think is probably right. There's a lot of fraud issues in this. And to do this that stigmatizes transgender girls, who most of them, as I have said in the letter, will have biological disadvantages, is really wrong. So please don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you for taking my question. So again, I only brought that topic up of gender versus sex in discussion because, again, my research says that in medicine. So I'm looking at the Yale School of Medicine, and it says, what do we mean, in an article that was issued in September of 21. It says, what do we mean by sex and gender? Aren't those terms interchangeable? And the answer is perhaps at some point in time they were used synonymously, but this is no longer true in science.
That may well be the case, but I would respectfully tell you that many things are said in journal articles that are not adopted by the medical community in their practice. I don't know that there is definitive sex versus gender in medical community, and plus which, I'm sorry, but I have been retired for quite a while. So can't necessarily explain that entirely well for your benefit. But I think, you know, this is not the question here, as has been said before. The question here is whether you're going to stigmatize girls, transgender or not, who have some appearance of having had more testosterone. And all people past puberty have testosterone until and unless their gonads are removed or they fail completely. And, you know, so I play tennis still. I am not the strongest member of my female tennis team. I am not the fastest. I am not the tallest. You know, nobody seems to object to my being there. Or if they do, they certainly haven't made it clear that they do. So I don't see that this is useful legislation. Perhaps some study that brings in New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association guidelines and talks about them. Principals get to say who is eligible and who is not. Maybe they need better guidance on who is eligible. I was a little shocked about the person in Connecticut who was not transitioning hormonally. I think that's possibly not right. But, you know, these are fraught issues. It's hard.
So again, it sounds like I think you agree, but again, the basic medical fact that a post-pubescent non-medicated males have a physiological advantage over biological females. I think you
I
testified to
am
that
one of
fact
the
that-
many people who has said that many times that, yeah, that's obvious. Testosterone matters. But some cisgendered, that is not trans women, have much higher levels of testosterone than other women. So what are we going to do? The article that I have referenced there does suggest perhaps a level of 10. That's more than 2.5 times the average female level. So there really is evidence that elite women's sports contain more women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Senator Ward, you would know what that is, who have higher levels of testosterone. You know, I have zero and have had zero testosterone for almost 25 years, and it does make a difference. I can attest to that. But we're not talking about that. And most of these young girls will have been on puberty blockers and or cross-sex hormones and actually have less testosterone or none.
Last question. This last question. So again, are you aware of the most current emerging science, especially over in Europe, where they're like the National Health Institute has rescinded the issuance of puberty blockers for minors because the fact that it's irreversible and they're not sure what the issues are.
That's not entirely correct.
Except in
That is
rare
not,
instances.
No, not in rare instances. In studies, they are insisting on they be part of studies. That is not rare instances. And there is a lot of pushback about that, and I think the pushback is appropriate. I know probably in the order of about 10 transgender girls, and I just don't see that any of them have been poorly served by that way things are done in this country at present, and nor have any of our major medical societies or psychological study people agreed with that decision. And we'll see where it ends up. That's a very new piece of information that we need to digest.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Representative Horrigan.
Thank you very much. I have some written testimony, so I'll hand it around the table, although you already got it in the
And you
email.
can just summarize the.
Of course, yes, in
Good.
3 minutes. So I'm
Excellent.
Representative Timothy Horrigan from Stratford County District 10, which is the town of Durham. You've already heard from my colleague, Representative Selig, and you heard a member Representative Ladd, who wasn't from Durham, but did purport to speak on behalf of the UNH Athletics Department. And I have to confess, I haven't asked them specifically about this issue, although I am a longtime season ticket holder for various sports, including the UNH women's basketball team, which I've been following for 20 years. So those of us who say I don't care about women's sports, I've been going to that team all those years, and it's fun, although it's not easy. They're not exactly the University of Iowa or the University of South Carolina, but they're fun to watch. To the best of my knowledge, it says my written tone, to the best of my knowledge, there's never been no trans women ever compete in these games. There's a school they play against, occasionally George Washington University, which had a trans player, but that was a trans man who transitioned from female. And she was not particularly, well, she's not particularly large. She was a 5'10" guard. So this bill attempts to totally balance males. We have a lot of bills micromanaging how schools do things, but this goes very far. We're trying to ban a whole class of students, not a very large class, but if you're a child or if you yourself are one of them, it's a big deal from an entire activity. And I think that's, it's a bad idea. We've been, at least some of the people have been treating high school sports as a zero-sum game, and the only point is to get a college scholarship. But it's about a lot more than that. And even though we did hear from a representative who said, I guess his granddaughter had gotten a full-ride Division I scholarship to Texas Christian University. She was way at the top of the pyramid. That's extremely rare, even at places
1
like
minute left.
1 minute. So, and I talked in my written testimony about the case of, and I guess it's okay to name her. She's an adult, although Representative Ladd didn't mention her name, which is CC Telfer, who is a sprinter for Franklin Pierce University is a trans woman. She did win one race in Division II championships, and that's certainly something to be celebrated. It's not that easy to do, but she didn't unfairly dominate her division, and she actually tried to get in the Olympics, and she didn't get in for two reasons. One was they ruled her ineligible, but also because she wasn't fast enough. So like whatever advantages she had were apparently not that unfair, because she did very well, that's something to be proud of, but didn't dominate. So let's talk about biological sex. Trans women are women, trans men are men, and anyway, your gender identity, whatever you are now as an adult, is what really matters, not the biological sex, not what you were necessarily assigned at a birth certificate. So all students should be encouraged to participate in sports. This bill is unnecessary. The NHIAA and the other the other organizations, the schools can they recognize it's a very complicated issue, and they're working on it. And
Your time is up.
yes, so it's inexpedient to legislate. I just say, aside from the fact that this will be sued if we pass it, it's not a good bill. We should ITL it. So I'd be happy to take any questions. Should anyone have any?
Any questions? Seeing none. Thank
Okay,
you very
good.
much.
I was hoping Resident Lang would then pepper me with all the questions, but I'm aware of all these studies. I'm not aware of most of them, but I think I understand the issue. But thanks.
Gillis Bissonette. Bissonette.
There's like a 30-second delay of sitting on the lobby. So.
Gillis Bissonette.
That's in there. You're up. Oh. I was just looking for a seat.
You Mr. Bissonette?
Oh, sure. Thank you.
You have 3 minutes, and if you have a written thing, please summarize it.
Thank you. Will do, Senator. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Gilles Bissonette. I'm the legal director of the ACLU of New Hampshire. We're here in opposition to HB 1205. I have very little to say beyond what has already been said today, and I know it's been a long hearing, and I don't want to be duplicative here, but I do just want to highlight that we believe that this bill would permit discrimination and violate federal law for all the reasons that was spoken to by Glad's testimony earlier this morning. And really, at its core, transgender kids want the opportunity to play sports for the same reasons other kids do, to be part of a team, to have that type of cohesion, to feel like you belong, to learn self-discipline, to promote self-esteem. And I think at its core, one of the concerns that we have is that this bill discriminates against transgender kids in particular who want that experience. And by requiring biological sex as a criteria for participation in sports, this bill prohibits transgender individuals from participating in athletics consistent with their gender. And in doing so, this legislation would violate federal law, in particular Title IX. And so I do think if this became law, schools would face really an impossible situation. They'd have to choose between the risk of liability if they don't comply with the impossible standards of this bill, or face losing Title IX funding. There are other reasons that we have concerns. I'll leave that in the written testimony. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from committee members? Seeing none.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we have your testimony here. Representative Mike Welver.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members. I'll be brief. As a father of 3 daughters, I got involved with sports because I didn't think the girls' teams in my town, my girls were being treated fair. And that led to becoming a youth softball coach for over 30 years. In that time, I've coached kids from 8 years old through college. I was a 15-year varsity softball coach, winning 5 New Hampshire state championships. So when it comes to softball, I think I've got as much experience and knowledge as anybody in this area. My daughter won 3 championships at high school, won 2 conference championships in college, was an All-American, and was invited to play with the U.S. Olympic team. So I understand the capabilities of average students and elite athletes. My granddaughter now is becoming quite a player. She's in 8th grade. She's playing with the varsity. And the whole thing that I'm concerned about is safety. My granddaughter is 13 years old, 5 foot tall, weighs 90 pounds, pitching varsity. And when she releases the ball, she's no further away from home plate than like this building, this room. The extra strength that biological males have makes it unsafe. She's going to be a great athlete, but when you're 35 or 38 feet away from, as a 13-year-old, from a possible 18-year-old biological male, nothing good can happen. So I do support HB 1205, just on the aspects of safety.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
One of the statement I sent around, that is a letter from the chairman of the Colebrook Academy School Board in complete support of HB 1205.
Glad you said that because I was looking at it and I said, did I call the wrong person?
No, you did not, but he asked me to hand deliver those this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Nancy Biederman.
Good morning. When we speak about gender identity, I think we all understand this term refers to a person's deep felt sense of who they are, but when I use the term biological sex, I'm referring to something different than a person's sense of themselves. Oh, sorry, Nancy Biederman, New Boston. Forgot about that part. I'm talking here about something that is part of human biology, that biological sex is a category that is different from your personal sense of identity or beliefs. Now, with that understanding in mind, does the law ever allow us to separate the male and female biological sexes? I think it does, as it's been the precedent for many years, especially in the sporting world. Women were denied equal access to sports for many years until the passage of Title IX. Does the law require that we only look at someone's deep felt identity and that we never use anything other than deep felt identity to differentiate between males and females? I don't think this is true, as feelings and identities change and are not based in science, fact, or common sense. We are asking that HB 1205 be passed because we are asking sports to be differentiated based not on how people identify, but the opposite. We suggest that you don't even look at how someone identifies, and we instead differentiate based on biological sex only. Sports are based on facts, numbers, and statistics. Sports and competitions are not based on beliefs and opinions. Scores are kept, times are registered, and rules are made to keep the playing field fair for each player. I've stated this before. It does not matter what you wear, what drugs you take, or what surgeries you have. You cannot make yourself into another biological sex, and to think you can is delusional. I was the state champion, doubles champion in 1987 in Connecticut, and I can say that I would not have been able to train to that level if it wasn't for the boys that practice with us. These boys were not allowed and would never ever thought about competing in our matches against other females. They were there to help us to be better players. This type of training is still being used today by high school and college women's teams in all types of sports. We rarely beat the boys during our practices because they were stronger and faster than we were. These boys were not in any sense athletes, but they did not play other sports during the year. They just enjoyed the sport of badminton and wanted to play and would never have thought of taking the place of any girl on the team.
One more minute.
When I hear other people say that scholarships and awards are not being lost to girls, I point to the indoor high jumper in New Hampshire who lost her chance to go to the regional track meet because a biological boy beat her by jumping an inch higher than any other girl in the meet. This boy would not have qualified for regionals had he competed in the boys' division. When are the adults in this room going to stop this nonsense and call it what it is, cheating? This girl who had trained just as hard and tried her best was denied an opportunity to reach her goal of going to regionals. As a high school athlete, this is a major accomplishment, as many high school athletes will not go on to play sports in college. To hear Democratic state representatives suggest that this is no big deal or an obscure competition is disheartening. It was great to hear recently in the news how a West Virginia girls middle school track team decided not to compete when a boy on the other team showed up to compete. That boy won the shot put competition by 3 feet. Now is the time to stand up and fight for women's sports and bring back the dignity of the sporting committee that I once loved and cherished. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Kate McCarthy.
Does this make your life easier?
Kate McCarthy.
Over there.
Thanks.
I don't know how long you've been hanging around, but we're down to 3 minutes per person, so
Down to? Wow, it's usually either 3 minutes or less, so cool.
that's great.
So good morning. My name is Kate McCarty, and I'm here in opposition to HB 1205. I haven't spoken on this issue solidly because I felt unqualified. I didn't play sports in school. I barely did anything in school. I had undiagnosed ADHD and autism. What that looked like for me was a kid who performed brilliantly in maybe 1 or 2 subjects and was garbage at the rest. A kid who barely spoke. A kid who would stay after class just to hang with the teacher because they didn't know how to talk to the other students. Or maybe just to read. After years of therapy, I was finally able to describe what I felt like growing up. I felt like a Kate doll. I was in my display box until someone took me out to play with me. My parents took me out to go to school. I was taken out for church, family supper, and for special events. I took no action unless I was reacting to something else. I was in my own world with no way out because I didn't know how to ask for help, or even that I needed help. I just knew that everyone around me was doing the thing, and I didn't even know what the thing was. I've often wondered what might have happened if I had been put into sports as a kid. I say put because I definitely would have balked. My comfort zone was blending into the background until I could get home to the relative safety of my bedroom. I was terrified of messing up and letting my entire team down. I was already ridiculed enough as it was. Unfortunately, this is something my parents, rest their souls, didn't push on me. How different might my life have been if I had the camaraderie of a team rather than always being separate? Not being included is very lonely, and that's not just sad. It leads to anger, resentment, depression, and suicidality. I'm a big fan of BBC shows. The UK vernacular is just so colorful. They have an expression over there, bollocks. What you have heard from many of the supporters of this bill is a load of bollocks. I heard, I'm afraid a man will put on a dress and assault me in the ladies' room so many times that I wish I could scream in their faces, ma'am, if you're afraid a man will put on a dress and assault you in the ladies' room, you're not afraid of a trans woman, you're afraid of men. If we're going to start banning trans people from places that they have every right to be, just because some transphobes think they might misbehave, then where are we on banning men from pretty much everywhere? Because we all know they do the lion's share of all the raping. That's right. It wouldn't be fair to punish the many for the sins of the few. But we're more than willing to punish all trans people for sins they haven't even committed yet, because they are the few, and therefore the easiest targets. Please vote ITL on HB 1205. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee member? Seeing none, thank you. Linz Jacobs.
They have to go find them, they're in a meeting, if you could call the next person.
I can call somebody else.
Yeah.
Let's have Sam Hawkins.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Morning.
My name is Sam Hawkins. I'm the Public Policy Assistant at NAMI New Hampshire, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. NAMI New Hampshire is a nonprofit grassroots organization whose mission is to improve the lives of all people impacted by mental illness and suicide through support, education, and advocacy. On behalf of NAMI New Hampshire, I'm here today in opposition to House Bill 1205. Resulting from experiences with discrimination, stigma, and exclusion, transgender and non-binary youth often experience negative mental health outcomes. As such, it should be our priority to ensure that everyone within our communities is accepted and able to live fully in accordance with their identity, free from stigma and discrimination. This acceptance and support within one's community plays a key role in mental health. We believe that Senate Bill 375 further jeopardizes the mental health of our trans and non-binary youth by eliminating affirming environments. It is crucial that our policies promote mental wellness and increase access to social support and affirmation rather than limiting it. For this reason, NAMI New Hampshire urges the committee to vote ITL for House Bill 1205. Thank you for your time.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Jonah Sutton,
Sorry, my name is Lynn Jacobs. My name was
okay,
before.
why don't you come in? Vince Jacobs.
Hello, members of the committee. My name is Lynn Jakehouse, and I strongly oppose this bill. There's no reason to change the 2015 New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association policy that includes transgender athletes. First, trans athletes vary in athletic abilities just like cisgender athletes. Quote, one high jumper could be taller and have longer legs than another, but the other could have perfect form and then do better, explains Andrea Yearwood, a former student track athlete. One sprinter could have parents who spend so much money on personal training for their child, which in turn could cause that child to run faster, she adds. In Connecticut, where non-transgender girl runners tried to block Andrea from participating in the sport she loves, the very same girls who have claimed that trans athletes have a quote-unquote unfair advantage have consistently performed as well as or better than transgender competitors. Overwhelmingly, we do not question girls who are assigned female at birth, although some of them may be significantly taller or vary in hormone levels to other girls. Runner Caster Semenya was assigned female at birth despite having XY chromosomes, but still made to undergo sex testing before being cleared to play. So if this bill were to pass, it would allow for the questioning of gender nonconforming women who were assigned female at birth and identify as women. A person's genetic makeup and internal and external reproductive anatomy are not useful indicators of athletic performance, according to Dr. Joshua D. Safer. For a trans woman athlete who meets NCAA standards, there is no inherent reason why her physiological characteristics related to athletic performance should be treated differently from the physiological characteristics of a non-transgender woman. It is telling that only a handful of adults want to block all transgender girls from playing the sport they love. When we do hear from young athletes, they are overwhelmingly supportive of their trans teammates. Those of you on this committee have now likely heard from Lane Jocelyn, a now 19-year-old transgender woman who played high school soccer with other girls throughout high school.
1 more minute.
She says, my closest friends played soccer with me in middle school and through high school. No one had a problem with me being transgender. There were no issues in the locker rooms or bathrooms, and I was treated exactly like everyone else. I guarantee that no one on the opposing teams had any idea that I am transgender. Playing on a team is such a unique experience with so many life lessons. I particularly enjoyed the friendship, school spirit, give and take necessary to create successful plays, the exercise, and learning how to handle defeat and be a good sport. One of Lane's teammates, Ellie, said, I had the pleasure of having Lane on my team during high school during the soccer seasons. Not only was Lane a fantastic teammate, but at no point did I think that she didn't deserve a spot on the team or was out of place. She was where she should be, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Another one of... Happy to answer any questions.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. And Lynn, thank you for taking my question. And just to be clear, I've asked folks who testified both in favor of this bill and those who have testified against it the same question. And since you mentioned testing, I want to ask you about a provision in this bill that talks about on the first page in section 4, if they don't have a birth certificate, or the birth certificate doesn't have the biological sex indicated on this, on the student sex at the time of birth, it would require, it says evidence, and any costs associated with gathering that evidence would need to be, those costs would need to be covered by the student or the student's parents. So do you have any, what's your response to that? Do you have any idea or thoughts on how to gather what this evidence might be?
Yeah, it's
You mentioned testing, so
I think examining the body parts of a minor is extremely invasive as a prerequisite to playing a sport that they love and finding belonging with other girls. And so it's a massive government overreach and completely inappropriate that we're even discussing sex testing in this bill.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Now we have Jonah Sutton Morse.
Hi.
3 minutes is what you have.
All right, thank you. My name is Jonah Sutton Morse. I live in Canterbury, and I'm here to testify against this bill. Trans girls are girls, so this is a bill that will result in excluding some girls from participation in school sports. You've heard testimony this morning, and the last time I was here, I talked about the intangible benefits of sports, learning teamwork, sportsmanship, leadership, work ethic, and inclusion. Those benefits are all still relevant, and they will still be inaccessible to girls across New Hampshire if this bill becomes law. It's also really strange to me that this bill treats a birth certificate as a proxy for someone's medical history. From a purely logistical perspective, I also don't understand what happens when a birth certificate gets challenged and how you determine someone's sex assigned at birth in a non-invasive way. But the other thing I just want to make sure we're clear on is that trans girls who know who they are and follow standard medical care will take puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormone therapy and will not go through typical male puberty that supporters of this bill seem so worried about when they bring up issues of safety and fairness. I am nearsighted. I played baseball in high school. I was not very good at it, but I played baseball in high school because I got medical care. I wear glasses. I can't live my life safely and well without standard medical care. The state has a vested interest in my ability to safely drive a car, which is pretty important to just how I can participate in daily life. And when I show up and say, I would like to renew my driver's license, no one says, can we see your birth certificate so you can prove that you can safely drive a car? Because a birth certificate isn't someone's medical history, and it doesn't document
1 more minute.
safety or fairness. This isn't a bill about safety or fairness. It is a bill about excluding girls across New Hampshire from participating in school sports. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Deborah House. Okay, we have the 3-minute rule.
Yes. Okay. Good morning. My name is Deborah Howes. I am the president of the American Federation of Teachers, New Hampshire. I am here on behalf of our 3,700 members across the state. We mostly work in K through 12 public education, as well as at university colleges, university private colleges, and town employees. We are parents and grandparents of public school children, as well as property taxpayers in the Granite State, and we are here to oppose HB 1205. All students in the Granite State have the constitutional right to a public education. Title IX protects all students the right to access that public education, including the academic programs, but also all of the after-school activities, clubs, including sports, free from bias, discrimination, and harassment based on who they are. Our New Hampshire non-discrimination law, RSA 354A, further protects those rights for all students, not just some students, but all of them. We oppose HB 1205 because it would deny some of the students the right to participate fully in their education. All of our students need to feel safe, welcome, and find the place where they belong in our public schools. For some, this is academics and the debate club, the math team. For others, it's the arts and joining chorus and being in the drama club. And for some, it's playing sports. It's where they learn teamwork, physical skills, sportsmanship, leadership, and it's where they make lifelong friends. Some specific things about this bill that I want to make sure you consider. It violates Title IX protections against discrimination based on who a student is. It also violates the Title IX practice that a school must have equivalent teams. If it has a single-sex team for boys and it doesn't have a same single-sex team for girls, it must allow students of the opposite sex to try out based on their skills. You can't have a girls' field hockey team and not allow the boys to try out under Title IX, because that would be discrimination under the current Title IX rules, or you would have to have a boys' field hockey team as well. You're not allowing equal opportunity in that sport.
1 minute left.
Yep, 1 minute left. Okay, other things you need to consider about this bill. If you pass this bill, you could have unintended consequences. In Texas, there was a transgender boy who ended up winning the girls' state wrestling championship because a policy very similar to this bill forced him to compete as a girl. So he won the state wrestling championship for girls, even though he was living as a boy and was under medical treatment, and he wanted to compete as a boy. It also, every time we have this debate about the existence of students and their rights and what they should rightfully be considered, it encourages bigotry and the expression of it. And it encourages people out in the public to stereotype students and hurl bigoted comments at them. When you're going to question, is that girl really a girl who you see playing on the opposing team? I think that might be really a boy. Are we going to subject students to harassment because of how they look? Do they look feminine enough? Are we going to insist that they have to prove whether they're really a girl just because they're out there playing sports and an opposing parent thinks that might really be a boy? We don't want to poison all student sports by repeatedly having this debate over who gets to play. Let's treat all our students fairly and protect their rights. We oppose HB 1205 and we urge you to find it inexpedient to legislate. Thank you very much. And I don't think there's any questions I could answer that you haven't already asked repeatedly.
Senator Lang.
So if there's a new one,
Nope, it's actually the same question I've been asking all along. Do you agree or disagree with the basic medical fact that post-pubescent non-medicated males have a physiological advantage over biological females? Do you agree with that medical principle or not?
it depends because people are all along a spectrum of physical size and physical ability. So I'm a fairly large female. You could put me next to a physical male and I might be stronger than that physical male. They could be a small physical male. So people come in all shapes and sizes. And I think that's enough. Yeah.
That was it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Nancy Brennan.
Oh, glasses and masks and. Good morning. My name is Nancy Brennan. I live in Ware. I have emailed you testimony that has links on it, and I emailed it because it's easier to press the link than to type. And I am not actually going to address that today. I actually wasn't going to testify, but I've been sitting here listening and hearing some of the same things that I have heard for years. This bill 1205 sits in the middle of a whole bunch of bills here in New Hampshire and a whole bunch of bills across the country that hurt and other a very small group of people. And I emphasize very small group of people. My school, the town I live in, I think there's one transgender identifying kid in 4 through 8 and one in the high school. So we're not talking about a lot of kids. But we are talking about the new so-called culture war. I am 75 years old. When I was in high school, I didn't know any gay kids. Well, yeah, I did, but they didn't come out then. When I was a teacher, I didn't know any trans kids. Well, I did, but they didn't dare come out. And these kids, these people exist, and every major medical and mental health organization acknowledges that transgender people are real. So with all due respect, what your religion might say about the rights of transgender people is irrelevant. There are studies which have been quoted that say one thing and studies that say another thing. I am asking for kindness and fairness. The amount of bullying around this issue against both trans people and cisgender people, those who might look a certain way, not look feminine enough or not look masculine enough, as well as the allies of transgender people, is just unbelievable to me. And I think these bodies have an obligation to not allow people to say he when you're talking about a transgender girl. Say she or say the transgender girl, because the amount of harm we do with that is just unbelievable. What the solution is, I am not sure. One of the things I sent you was that New York Times article where they're looking at ways like testosterone, ways to decide in elite sports. We're still talking about school sports here, high school sports and middle school sports, but in elite sports, ways to be fair. And even the IOC at the elite level says there is no blanket solution. So I think we need to do that. I think we need to push for kindness, and I think we need to expect it from everybody who testifies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, thanks. Emma Savigny? Okay. Representative Pertnell?
Sorry, what was that name again?
We have Kathy Pertnell or Arlene Guantello. Okay. Arlene Guantello?
Arlene? I'm not speaking.
Arlene?
That's on the wrong sheet.
That's another rep. Well, she didn't want to speak, okay. How about Devin Quinn?
Devin Quinn.
Hold on for lunch.
Got somebody coming.
You Devin Quinn?
Yes, I am.
Good.
Making sure
Welcome.
I'm the one you called. I've been calling of you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Devin Quinn. I'm the Director of Policy for the New Hampshire Women's Foundation, where we invest in equality and opportunity for the women and girls in New Hampshire through research, education, advocacy, and grant making. And we are respectfully and adamantly opposed to this bill because it discriminates against trans girls who deserve to be accepted and included in schools, particularly in school athletics, and have access to the many benefits of sports, including teamwork and friendship and belonging. New Hampshire is facing a youth mental health crisis, particularly among girls and particularly among LGBTQ girls. We need more supports for girls, including trans girls, not attacks and exclusion. Logistically, this bill is inconsistent with the NHIAA, or the Interscholastic Athletic Association rules. New Hampshire has recently enacted non-discrimination laws, and it may open the door for violations of Title IX. The New Hampshire Women's Foundation, along with other women's sports organizations, including the National Women's Law Center, the Women's Sports Foundation, Women Leaders in College Sports, all support trans-inclusive policies in sports. There are real issues in women's sports from middle school, high school, and college, in a lack of equity and resources that we can address. But student athletes are not asking for us to ban their friends from playing with them. And so with them, we ask you to let trans girls play. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Emma Savini is here.
Cool.
Emma Savini. who you-
Okay.
Hello, members of the committee. Sorry to have missed my name being called earlier. For the record, my name is Emma Savini, and I am the Children's Behavioral Health Policy Coordinator at New Futures. New Futures is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that solves problems through policy change. We are here in strong opposition to House Bill 1205 because children who are able to participate in sports that align with their gender identities have better mental health outcomes and mental health outcomes on par with their peers. When children are unable to participate in sports that align with their gender identities that they live as day to day, they feel discrimination, and that discrimination directly corresponds with higher rates of depression, suicidality, self-harm, anxiety. The list goes on and on. However, when children feel supported and welcomed in their homes, schools, families, and communities, such as being able to play sports, use restrooms, or just live out their day-to-day gender identities, their mental health outcomes are on par with their peers. And so sports are a really important component in developing not just better mental health outcomes, but leadership, teamwork, confidence, decision-making, self-discipline. All of these skills, all students have equal right to develop. And so for those reasons, New Futures would ask the committee to vote ITL on 1205, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Anybody?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michelle Silly Fossey.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Silifoisi. I live in Temple, and I'm here in opposition to HB 1205. My time as an athlete has significantly contributed to the adult I am today, including the development of my sense of self and confidence. For as long as I can remember, I have felt more at home, more myself when I have a soccer ball at my feet or while wearing my running shoes. As a 5-year-old soccer player, I learned the joys of teamwork and the importance of dedication. As an 18-year-old runner, I learned self-discipline and drive. Sports have given me a lifelong community while uplifting both my physical and mental health. Despite being the record holder at Londonderry High for several track and field events, I was second in the state for the long jump, the 600, the 400, my junior and senior years. I went on to compete in the New England Championship and was in the top 6. There were very interesting stories behind these losses, but the lessons I learned from them were the very important takeaways. I wasn't always going to be first, and learning how to gracefully lose with humility was something that has stayed with me to this day. Secondly, my dedication, focus, practice, and training may bring me closer to the top. I was recruited and given an athletic scholarship to continue running at Northeastern University. However, my freshman year, I sustained a career-ending injury, and while my career may have officially ended, I still run and play soccer today. One of the most important lessons I learned as an athlete was to never give up. Perseverance in life brings you places you may never have dreamed of and will carry you through times of struggle. Now, 31 years after graduating high school, I am a mom of 6. I am a mom to a dancer, a former lacrosse player, a former rugby player, and 3 soccer players. As a mother, I hope my children learn grace, the community, power of community and working as a team, compassion for others, empathy, discipline, and acceptance while enjoying their time in sports. This past year, my 17-year-old survived an attempted suicide due to their gender dysphoria and severe depression. Now they are receiving essential medical care to allow their body to be the more feminine home they feel is their own. And while our journey supporting a trans teen has been very difficult at times, I cannot imagine the added turmoil a ban such as this would bring. The isolation that trans youth endure is inconceivable for most. Separating and excluding a small group of kids from their friends and teammates further exacerbates this isolation. Supporting and promoting the blatant discrimination of transgender athletes is not the way of the Granite State. Sports should be a place where we embrace diversity and teammanship. Trans girls are girls, and they belong playing alongside their fellow non-transgender female athletes. The relationships a person experiences through being a part of a sport are life-changing. Though few athletes reach the highest level of competition, lessons received through being a part of a sport are immeasurable. To remove an athlete from a team that has bonded and created lasting relationships due to their biological sex, negating their true identity as a trans youth would have a detrimental effect on all student athletes.
30 seconds.
To consider a trans girl as a female during her school day but exclude her from joining a school sports team is an outright denial of her equal educational opportunities. As legislators, you need to prevent and stop the repercussions of this bill. Please vote ITL for HB 1205.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a Therese Basturage.
Good morning, and thank you for your time. My name is Therese Bastarash. I am a registered nurse. A few points that I want to make here. Title IX was created to bring equality and give girls an opportunity to participate. We're looking at change as we move forward. The culture is changing. We're embracing different things. But as a medical perspective, you can Google what are the lab values for men versus women, and they're different. Your hemoglobin, there's different lab values there. When I am practicing as a clinician, I need to know the biological sex in order to appropriately medicate and get the right dosing recommended by the provider. That is also an NIH. Those credible differences between the XY and the chromosomes of male versus female. And that is why Title IX was created, because girls didn't have an opportunity to run in a marathon and have a fair playing field. We are now taking that out from under them and now creating an environment where we're legislating to benefit a few at the penalty of the majority. We're sending the majority of girls this message that you're now going to have to compete with male biological capability. I have so many high school athletes that are like, why bother? Why give it my everything I've got if at the very end of my career, I'm going to be knocked out from under me by someone who has male biological capabilities? We might as well just forget female sports altogether. That's not fair. You can't legislate to benefit a few at the penalty of the majority. I believe Title IX, there's a lot of legislation even in the House that's questioning and looking at this. I think a simple answer would be co-ed sports, that both genders could participate. I do believe that we should not be bullying. But what's to say at some point if we don't have a 20-year-old that decides to identify as a 13-year-old? Are we going to be in the same situation then, and we have a 20-year-old then on the soccer field with our 13-year-olds? Life isn't always fair. We're coming to this world with what we're given and the opportunities, and we have to make the very best of that. And we need to support that in every single category of humanity. We do need to be kind to each other. We do need to give opportunity. But by allowing transgender to participate in female sports, you really are penalizing the majority of those female athletes. So you have to look at the whole picture. And why was there a feminist movement? Why did we fight to have women's sports and to have equality and to have a Title IX to begin with? Because we wanted girls to be able to go and play just like the boys could. So maybe now as we venture forward, we start to look at co-ed sports. That opens the door for all of these different variations. But I think it's a very slippery slope, and we're going to end up unintentionally penalizing the majority of girls who want to participate in something that does teach them discipline and leadership and how to work collaboratively. But if we're not going to have male teams and we're not going to have female teams, and the testing, the question of, government overreach to prove that I am a biological female or male, that is easily done with a DNA test.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Question? Senator Prentice has a
Thank you.
question for you.
Is it Teresa?
Therese,
Therese. Oh, and thank you for your work in nursing. So
Thank you.
your last comment, sir, you've obviously been hearing the question I've been asking all day long. I'm trying to sort out exactly if biological sex is not on a birth certificate or they don't have a birth certificate with them. You brought up lab values, and another representative talked about lab values distinguish male from female. So would it be your position, or are you suggesting that a DNA test could be used as evidence so that is the way that this is currently defined or stated in this bill?
I believe either you could ask for a PCP provider to provide a written document as to the biological sex of an individual, or lab value, simple DNA lab value will show whether there's XY chromosomes or what the sex is biologically.
Okay, thank you for taking my question.
You're welcome.
That is the end of the people who have signed up. Is there anybody in the audience who hasn't heard enough, who likes to add something that nobody else had said? If so, please stand up. Not seeing anyone who wants to add anything to this closes the hearing on Senate Bill 1205. Thank you very much for hanging in there. What bill is this? This is closer to 1205. But I recognize all the names on it.
Now that you're speaking, yeah, 9, 10.
All the same people are going to speak on this?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Okay, we move on to House Bill 1312, 1312. And the prime sponsor is Representative Perez.
Hi. Thank you. I am going to be very brief, and I have passed around, and I apologize. I have to leave after my testimony. I have to get my daughter into Boston to a doctor. So thank you very much for having me. House Bill 1312 was brought forward by me, Christine Perez, at the request of a constituent. The concern was that the requirements to adopt policies as per RSA 186 appeared to be only used for health and sex education classes. There were no policies that prohibited discussions of similar sensitive material in other classrooms without parental notification. This bill would simply add the word any in front of the curriculum, thus clarifying the law. Unfortunately, our numbers are on the decline in our public schools, and scores and efficiencies are also declining. In addition, the suicide rate among our youth are increasing. Parents want to know what their children are being taught. They want to be the first, not the last, to know of changes in their child's mental, emotional, or physical health. School staff, coaches, club leaders spend more hours a day with these young people than their parents do during the school year, and changes and/or concerns could or are noticed by them first. We want them to be able to tell the parents these changes. If we can't get see something, say something on board, at least we can require answers if a parent asks specifically about the health, well-being of their children. Brief.
Very brief.
Questions?
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Blancadelli?
Get out of the way.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and honorable senators. For the record, Glenn Cordelli, representing Tufton Borough, Wolfboro, and Ossipee in the beautiful Lakes region. HB 1312 does just two common sense things to support families in their efforts to educate children. First, current law requires that school district policies notify parents 2 weeks in advance when instruction or programs are given related to human sexuality or sex education, so that they have the ability to opt their child out of those instructions. HB 1312 simply adds sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression to those instructions or programs, requiring advance notice. The second thing this bill does is to prohibit districts from adopting policies that prevent school staff from answering a parent's questions about their child's emotional, physical health, sexuality, or any change in services. Parents have a right to know. Do we want school staff withholding answers and keeping secrets from parents? Whose kids are they anyway? Any policy that would keep answers from parents is destructive. It would destroy the relationship between parents and child. It would destroy the trust between parents and schools. This should not be hard. Just tell parents the truth when they ask. There is a protection in this bill. It does allow for information to be withheld if there is a reasonable expectation that the disclosure would lead to abuse or neglect of the child. We were told in the House during our hearings that this bill is divisive and dangerous. Dangerous? For who? For the relationship between the parent and child, maybe. I asked a moment ago about whose children they were anyway. I feel that some want to insert government into a parenting role.
One more minute.
Back in 1925, Pierce versus the Society of Sisters, Supreme Court case, part of the majority opinion stated, the child is not a mere creature of the state. This is very simple. Let parents know when instruction is to be given about sexuality, gender, or gender identity, so they can opt their child out if they wish. And secondly, just tell the parents the truth when they ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Prentice.
Thank you. And Representative Cordelli, thanks for taking my question. So the previous speaker, the prime sponsor of the bill, said it really focused in on the word and so the first section of this bill and the use of the word any and the more specific requirements around sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. So is it your, in recognizing, as she did and as you are, that there's already provision in law that if there is concern about material that's going to be presented in a classroom, that parents have the opportunity to object to it. So is your position that just saying human sexuality or human sexual education is not enough? We have to add all these things in. I mean, is that your position, and what's the purpose?
Yes, that is my position. And I think I have heard confusion about that in the past, whether this applied to any courses of instruction or just sexual education. So I felt it necessary, along with Representative Perez, that these specifics be added.
Follow up?
Follow up?
Thank you. So, but there is a current mechanism in law for objections to be raised. Your position is that you want to add these things in because you don't think that that's enough, that the language as it is, human sexuality or human sexual education is enough. Your position is that that we need to put this extra language in.
I believe it's for clarity purposes.
For
so
clarity,
that there's
but
no
there is a provision in law now that
for sexuality
for
and
parents, okay, which includes at least that.
Follow up?
Great, thanks. So I'm going to switch gears here because I
Okay.
think there is a provision in the law, so parents already can object. But I want to, it struck me that I didn't hear this loud and clear, and it might be my own fault when Representative Perez was introducing this bill, that there's a section in here which looks an awful lot or sounds an awful lot like a current Senate bill, and also like the past attempts at the Parental Bill of Rights, which in your body has been indefinitely postponed. So first of all, let me be clear, Representative Cordelli, I don't agree with lying. I think honesty is always the best policy, and honesty between parents and their children is always the best policy. But I think, that we've heard plenty of testimony and experience that isn't always what's happening. So are we looking here to once again try to overreach into the role of teachers and put them under pressure?
I'm sorry.
Is that what you're
No, I think too many times we've seen that the overreach occurs on the behalf of the school district, overreaching into a parent's responsibility.
Follow up?
Follow up?
So you're saying the school district and the teacher, are you lining
Yes.
those up? So the teacher in the classroom is who I'm talking about.
Yep, right. And I
Okay.
think if there's an overreach, it's not between parent and child, it's between teacher not telling parents what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Question, Madam Chair.
If I
Senator Benton.
could answer the second part of the question that I heard. There is a Senate Bill 341, right, that there are some differences between the bills, and it's in a different section of the RSAs.
May I, since Representative Cordelli opened it, but it essentially deals with the same.
The same general topic.
Right, which is, again, in a Senate bill, was indefinitely postponed in your body, and so we're just back at this a different way. Thank you.
Senator Benton?
Representative Cordelli, thank
Hi.
you for being here. You get
Sure.
all the fun questions. You talked about parents' responsibility. Now, educators are educators. They're educated to educate. Parents parent their children. So the way I'm understanding this is that if the child doesn't want to tell the parent something, you want to make sure the teacher tells the parent, correct?
I want to make sure that the parent knows what's going on in schools. Parents have, as you said, the responsibility to parent, but also as part of parenting is education as well, in my view.
You want to follow up? No. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stephen Scare?
Stephen Scare, Nashua, New Hampshire. Good morning again. I'm speaking in support of this bill because it's going to help parents protect their children from being indoctrinated into transgenderism and exploited by the medical industry. This month, National Health Service England released the CAS review, a 4-year study conducted as part of the concerns that led to the closure of the Tavistock, the world's largest pediatric gender clinic. Policymakers were concerned that almost every child receiving hormonal interventions had autism or a significant mental health disorder. Their new model will focus on psychotherapy to treat the underlying disorders and help children become comfortable with their bodies. The review concluded that there is no sound evidence that puberty blockers and hormones improve mental health, and while suicide risk is higher in trans-identifying youth, the rates are comparable to those with the same coexisting mental health conditions. They aren't at immediate risk of suicide, and the hormonal treatments don't reduce the risk. It warns that social transition shouldn't be considered a neutral intervention because it can change the outcome. The review acknowledges that transgender identities can be spread through peer groups and social media. This is the opposite of what our schools and our medical industry teaches. No one can define gender identity without relying on circular reasoning or regressive stereotypes. But public schools teach children the religious idea that they're born with immutable gender identities, and these identities, not their bodies, are their authentic selves, and failure to affirm them will result in suicide. Our schools secretly affirm these identities by using new names and pronouns. Advocacy groups and medical associations label attempts to help children become comfortable with their bodies as conversion therapies. As a result, our schools are pipelines to clinicians who allow children to diagnose themselves as transgender and tell them that binders, puberty blockers, hormones, and mastectomies will help them become their authentic selves. And of course, I'm not a physician, but Hilary Cass is a former leader of the England's Royal Medicine Society and one of the most eminent physicians. And these findings were also the results of the systemic reviews in Sweden and Finland. So I'm asking you to vote to pass on this bill because parents need honest answers to protect their children from becoming lifelong medical patients.
Thank you very much.
One question. Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I'm a graduate of New Hampshire's public schools, and you mentioned being indoctrinated into transgenderism. What class is that? I must have been absent that day. Where are they teaching that?
I appreciate the sarcasm, but when I walk into, I have no idea what's going on in individual classrooms, although there's a great site that records what teachers are doing. Well, the last time I was in the high school where I go to in Nashua, there was a big poster or a big set of posters on the wall teaching about the different gender identities and suggesting that people may want to seek medical interventions if they're transgender. And I'm happy to send that to you. I took a photo.
Just a quick follow-up.
Follow up.
So you saw a poster about gender identities? That's what led to your testimony today? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you don't have to rely on my testimony. You've heard from the American Federation of Teachers that they believe that some kids are transgender, and our policy of affirming new names and new pronouns show that people believe in these pronouns. Walk into a high school anytime in June, and you will see the symbols of transgenderism, which is a religious idea, all over the school.
What's that? Yep. Thank you very much. Representative Likas. I just saw her. It's you. Alicia Likas. She's here. She's sitting in here. I have you down here as wanting to speak. On 1312?
Yeah, no, I crossed it off.
See this.
Yeah. I crossed it off.
Okay, you pass it. Okay. Henry Banfield. Jill Bissonette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How's everyone doing today? I know it's been a long day. I'm going to keep.
It's still morning.
Is it? It's getting close to the afternoon. Thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Gilles Bissonette. I'm the legal director at the ACLU of New Hampshire. And we are opposing HB 1312 that's before the committee today. And this bill really does have two parts. The first part has to do with changes with respect to the 14-day notice provisions that already exist in the law. And the second part obviously has to do with disclosure obligations. I'm going to focus on part one in my my oral testimony, though our written testimony covers both parts one and two, and that's being done in collaboration with GLAAD. That'll focus on the second part of the bill. So I just wanted to be very clear kind of what I'll be talking about today. But we do think the first part of this bill is problematic. So at its core, this bill, part one, will likely cause the self-censoring in classes and in all undefined programs of instruction and curriculum that reference LGBTQ plus people. And that's because I think anything that implicates the existence of LGBTQ plus individuals under this bill is deemed sensitive and now subject to the 14-day notice provisions that exist in this bill. And so what this bill does is expand the scope of the existing statute's 14-day notice and opt-out provisions from human sexuality and human sexual education, and that was part of a law enacted in 2017, and expands that to any curriculum course material used for instruction or program of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. I think there's multiple problems with this. I think the first is, in so doing, the bill seems to be targeting and I think stigmatizing any instruction concerning LGBTQ plus people. And I think this language really sends the message to LGBTQ plus students that their feelings and identities are something to be shunned, feared, potentially even censored, or not even acknowledged. And I just think that's profoundly concerning, especially where we know that there are higher rates of homelessness, housing instability, among other things, with respect to individuals in the LGBTQ plus community. But I also think the second reason is I think this bill's impracticability when you try to assess how would this be implemented in real time, given the terminology of this bill, because its scope is really broad. I think when you think about it, for example, under this bill's broad terms,
One more minute.
Oh, thank you. It could even apply to a book assigned in a history class on the Stonewall Uprising, which was a series of protests among members in the LGBTQ plus community. So assigning even the marriage equality decision would arguably be covered under this. So I don't really know how educators can comply with that, or maybe that is the idea for that type of material to be subject to notice. And the last point is I think it's broad in that it requires notification and opt-out for any course materials that discuss sexual orientation or gender, period. And I think the one obvious response to that is that every person has a sexual orientation and a gender that feature prominently in every aspect of their life. It's not just folks in the LGBTQ space. An orientation is being straight as well. And those relationships too are covered within the scope of what I think is very broad terminology in this bill. So with that, I'll conclude my testimony. Right on the mark. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any questions from the, you have a question?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I want to follow up on what you just said. So, the broad scope of this, but if we're talking about heterosexuality, it'd be we'd have to give notice as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, sexual orientation is heterosexuality, homosexuality. It's the whole gamut of sexual orientations, right? So we're not just talking, one example, as I mentioned before, a book on, the Stonewall riots, but another example would be like Romeo and Juliet, right? Which explores a heterosexual, the obvious issues within an adolescent heterosexual relationship. Is that covered? I don't know. I mean, that is something that implicates sexual orientation based on the four corners of this bill. So I just don't know how you apply that in real world settings where educators are making decisions about what to cover and what to provide notice on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chris Herschel?
Thank you, Chair Ward, members of the committee. Chris Urchel, I'm an attorney on behalf of GLAD. I want to make clear that teachers must not ever encourage students to lie to their parents. That is not the appropriate role for teachers to play in students' lives, and fortunately, they don't. I have never heard a credible allegation that a New Hampshire public school teacher has lied to a parent or encouraged a student to lie to a parent about an important personal issue, certainly not about LGBTQ status. School policies across the state do not endorse lying to parents or encouraging students to lie to their parents. There are many reasons why open and honest communications with families is necessary, but one important facet is that schools cannot do their job of educating students if they're not working in partnership with parents. I often advise school personnel about the importance of students talking to their parents about sensitive issues related to identity and health. I say what teachers already know, which is that school is a public place. Information will always get back to parents, and it is essential that students have the resources they need and the confidence they need to have important conversations with their parents at home. I tell teachers and administrators to respond to parent inquiries about sensitive issues with encouragement. This is a question you should be asking your child. And do you need resources or support to have these conversations at home? There are exceptions, of course, where speaking directly to a student's parents about these issues may be critically important. The bottom line, though, is that Section 2 of this bill is unnecessary because schools do not encourage students to lie to parents. And to suggest otherwise is stigmatizing and undermines the really important role schools play in encouraging open communication with families. I want to say that, I agree with everything that Gilles Bissonnette from ACLU New Hampshire said. Just before, I want to ask this committee, Henry VIII is, we all know, a king who had 6 wives. That's the first thing you learn about him. The fact that he is a man and that he's heterosexual. Is covering anything about Henry VIII going to be subject to the opt-out and notice requirements of this bill? If not, why? It's not clear from the text of the bill why it would be different. And so with that, I want to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Thank you. Representative Andrews? Nope. Okay. Representative Corrigan.
I'm Representative Timothy Horgan from Stratford County District 10, which is the town of Durham. And so I'm opposed to this bill, even though it's not quite as bad as the equivalent bill SB 341, which hopefully, well, it's going to the floor of the House. Hopefully it'll be killed, but you never know. So we get to part 2. It's largely unnecessary because, schools already do respond as truthfully as they can to the children. It's not in their interest to lie anyway, although there may be sometimes a parent may hear something they're not expecting to hear just for various reasons, including the fact that maybe the teacher, the people in the school see a different side of a child who is a person in their own right, not just the parent's property. And there's also an issue with the second part of the bill, which is endemic to a lot of bills about education, it says a parent, but some people have step parents. Sometimes you have a custodial parent and a non-custodial parent. Sometimes even a parent who's like estranged either from the child and or the other parents. There's a lot of situations, so the school may not always be corresponding with the parents. Some children have guardians, so there's that problem. With the first part, the first part, gender, everybody's got gender, everybody's got a gender identity and gender expression. I'm a generic, I'm sort of a generic human being. I'm a straight cis man, but I still have a gender identity and a gender expression. So you pretty much can't talk about anything without getting into those issues. So I don't really know what 2 weeks advance, that'd be a 2 weeks advance notice of anything they're covering in the curriculum. And I think probably we better just get advance notice, get permission, blanket permission for the parents when the child gets there. And also, this is more something probably makes more of a difference to people who support it. It's in the RSA about school districts. That includes chartered public schools, although they tend to follow what the school districts does. That's an ambiguity that's endemic to education law. It also says nothing about public academies or also private schools which accept funding from what either called the Education Freedom Account or the school vouchers, depending what side the issue on. So there's no protections. There's no protection for how those schools, which are spending taxpayer dollars, are addressing the issue. So I urge you to. Anyway, these are very difficult issues. You can't make them go away by passing this bill. And certainly, I know there's some communities in New Hampshire that are struggling with them. There's an interesting report coming out in a major national newspaper about a community in northern New Hampshire that's having problems. But anyway, I think I urge you to ITL this bill. Like it's, I think both it and the similar bill that's going to the floor of the House, both nothing is to gain by passing them. So I urge you to ITL them. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Questions? Seeing none.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you very much. Nancy Biederman. Oh, let's see.
We're almost at afternoon. Nancy Biederman, New Boston. Good morning. As a concerned parent and former teacher, I'm here to let you know what has been happening in my school district, SAU 19. On September 28th, 2023, myself and a large group of parents and concerned citizens addressed our local school board. It was brought to our attention by a parent taking an open house tour of our middle school that there was a bulletin board that had gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation information posted. The bulletin board was placed there by the guidance counselors in plain sight for any student in the middle school that went to the library. Our middle school consists of 5th to 8th grade. That's 9 and 10-year-olds to 14 to 15-year-olds. Attached to my speech, and I'll hand it into, is a picture of what was posted on the board. The gingerbread man used to explain gender identity, compelled speech requiring students to use preferred pronouns, gender identity versus orientation, discussing sexual concepts. You would think that after being made aware of this bulletin board, the superintendent and the school board would ask for its removal based on content. No, that didn't happen. It was removed because it'd been up there for a bit and it should be changed. We are shocked that the school officials thought this information was appropriate to show young children without parental consent. As of 2017 in the state of New Hampshire, according to New Hampshire law RSA 18611, it requires school districts or classroom teachers to provide a minimum of 2 weeks advance notice to parents prior to instruction of human sexuality or human sexual education. No proof of a permission slip was ever shown. In place of that bulletin board, a Trevor Project poster was placed there. On that poster is a link to a chat room, phone numbers to call, and most disturbing, a social network site for children ages 13 to 14. I've attached a picture of that photo for you. One parent in New York contacted the Trevor social network site, the Trevor Space, for information to help her child. What she found was nothing any parent would be expecting. She opened a Pandora's box of sexually perverse content, aggressive gender reassignment referrals, adults encouraging minors to hide their transition from their parents, and many troubled kids in need of psychological counseling. I've taught school for 15 years, kindergarten to 8th grade. I never talked about sexuality, not sure why teachers feel the need to do so. Please help parents keep their children safe from exposure to an ideology that they do not agree with or want their children exposed to. It is not the job of the school district to decide this. Parents have the right to know what is being taught and discussed with their children in a school setting. School personnel are crossing the line. That needs to stop today, right here, right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions for you. Thank you very much. Linz Jacob. Linz Jacob. Linz. Not there? How about Jonah Sutton Morse? Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jonah Sutton Morse. I live in Canterbury, New Hampshire. I'm here to testify against HB 1312. I'm the parent of a trans non-binary kid, and the first part of this bill extends things from saying sex ed requires advance notice and the options for parents to opt their kids out of a class to any course material that relates to my kid's identity as who they are requires advance notice and the options for parents to opt their kids out of a class. I have been trying to find the words to describe how disgusting and heartbreaking it is to read that, and I can't, right? Talking about who my kid is something that needs advance notice, is pretty much the most horrifying thing that I've seen when I've been in here and listened to things. I also want to point out my 10-year-old daughter is her oldest sibling's fiercest defender. She came home the other day. She was outraged about an assignment she had gotten. Dad, the worksheet said, pick a character and write about him or her. What about non-binary people? As has been pointed out before, teachers and classrooms are actually full of instruction and curriculum about sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, and expression. Most of the time, it's about reinforcing existing cisgender and heterosexual norms. And so lots of people don't remark on it. And then when we say, maybe we should find ways to be more inclusive, it becomes ideology. You've heard some folks talk about other topics that would require notification and the ability to opt out of lessons. I won't give my list, but it's written. I just want to point out that this is an impractical attempt to let parents opt their children out of learning lessons about people, about how to address them respectfully, about how to have an inclusive community. It lets parents take their kids out of those lessons and that class.
1 more minute.
About people like my kids sitting in the classroom right next to them. And that's really heartbreaking. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deborah House.
Good afternoon.
This afternoon.
Yes. My name is Deborah Howes. I am president of the American Federation of Teachers, New Hampshire, and I'm here on behalf of our 3,700 members across the state to oppose HB 1312. We mostly work in kindergarten through 12th grade education, as well as university faculty and town employees. We are parents and grandparents of public school children and local property taxpayers. We oppose this bill because, for one reason, it's not necessary. There is already a way for any parents who object to what is the content of sex education in health class or biology to opt their children out of it. If you pass this bill that expands the areas that a parent is required notification of and can opt a child out of, where will it stop? If you expand to any course or program that mentions gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, how far will it go? Can you study the pay gap between men and women in the same jobs in an economics class, which has to do with policies around gender discrimination? That has to do with gender. How about studying the fight for civil rights for gay and lesbian Americans in modern American history? Would that be allowed if this bill passes? Can we read Shakespeare's As You Like It, where characters dress as the opposite gender, and talk about why the author may have written that? Those are all explorations that could touch on topics that are mentioned in this bill. Passing this bill will cause the limiting of students' ability to have a robust academic experience in our public schools, and they have a right to have that robust academic experience. We deserve to give our public school students the best. And for those who think that these fears are overblown, we do have the recent experience of our Commissioner of Education, Frank Edelblut, launching an investigation into a teacher reading a book where a family had two mothers. That's all. There was nothing salacious in this book, nothing that discussed what the parents did in private, just that there were two mothers in the family. Why would that book be at all controversial? Would that require parental notification if this bill passes? Does it require parental notification if the family has a mother and a father? Are you going to put every school in the situation where they have to consider before they read a storybook that mentions parents at all? And beyond that, all of our students need to feel safe, welcome, and that they belong in our public schools. This bill will make it harder. The second part of the bill that requires teachers and school staff to keep watch over students and report out to parents any changes that they notice, under the presumption that they're keeping secrets if they don't notice something, if they don't report out on it. That's just going to increase students' distrust and anxiety. We strongly believe that parents should be talking to students and students should be talking to parents. Don't put teachers in the middle of this. They don't notice everything. They can't notice everything. Their job is to teach. Let students focus on learning at school. Let teachers focus on teaching. And please find HB 1312 inexpedient to legislate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Brian Hawkins. Three minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Brian Hawkins representing NEA New Hampshire. We are here in opposition to HB 1312. As we've stated at numerous hearings on bills such as this, parents and educators have been working well together for a long time in New Hampshire, and we should be passing bills to further that relationship, not fracture it with confusing and intimidating legislation such as the one before the committee today. We think that 1312 is another piece of legislation that would significantly limit educators' ability to teach and provides far too many instances of vague language and framework to determine when certain actions violate the statute. Starting just with section 1 of the bill, I think most of that has been covered. We do think that the addition of the additions in that create a very, very broad broad set of circumstances in which certain course curriculum could be included. We have significant concerns that it's asking educators to issue spot what course material may be falling into this, and then what topics would seem to be included, very subjective on the educator's behalf. And the district, and if the district does not provide the parents with notice within 2 weeks of that material, in theory, they could be pointing the finger at the educator for not flagging that material because it says the school district or the classroom teacher. And with that attached with the broadening of the law is very concerning. So the carve out against potential discipline for a teacher for failing to provide notice via the district. This is not adequate. How much can the educator say in response to a question? How narrowly does the educator need to tailor their answer to a student question? What if an answer from an educator to a student's question prompts yet another question?
One more minute.
One more minute, okay. So we don't think it is an adequate protection in there to support a classroom discussion. I'll go straight to section 2 and skip over some things. We think that this also contains very vague language, which would make it difficult for the educator to comply with this law. Specifically, as an example, we're concerned about the language that stating encourage or have the effect of encouraging a student to withhold from a parent. This is entirely too vague to provide an educator with notice about what they can and cannot say that may result in discipline for running afoul of the law. Same thing with this, the exception here, although the final sentence in that paragraph does not alleviate, or excuse me, the final sentence does not alleviate any concerns that we raise in this section. There's no requirement that the school district adopt sufficient procedures or safeguards around this mandatory. I'll close. And so this could potentially result in problems there. So I'll close my testimony and happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Yep.
Go ahead, Senator.
So in looking in line 9 of this bill, any curriculum course material used, who's responsible for defining the curriculum for a school and the materials used? Is it the school board or the teacher?
The curriculum is approved by the school board.
So follow up.
Follow up.
So again, we would know the content of this material because the school board has to approve it long in advance to be able to give parents notice.
I think that the trouble is but the material used this is a different story, I think. So the material used in here, as was stated earlier, could cover a whole variety of situations because you're now singling out certain protected classes and issues, gender identity. That could apply in a whole host of areas. I'm just thinking about literature, history classes. Is there a 2-week notice that needs to go out anytime any mention of someone's gender is raised in a history class? I mean, we all have a gender and is that something that is going to require every single notice to go out with regard to this? The Department of Education had issued a technical advisory similar to this bill earlier, and the guidance did not help define this any further. So I think this is vague and leaves the educator and the administration wondering what is included in here.
Again, I'm just trying to, yeah, my question is around the word curriculum.
Yeah.
And who's responsible for curriculum? Can a teacher go off script and just use any curriculum they want, or can they only use the curriculum approved by a school board?
Well, I think a good example would be if you're teaching a social studies class and there's some kind of current event that is going on. How are you supposed to have a dynamic conversation in a classroom without wondering whether you're going to run afoul of this law? And I think we've seen through evidence, because as I said, the department tried to do this without a statute change back in the fall, that their guidance was no further helpful in helping to determine what kind of what falls under notice and what doesn't. And so and this law doesn't help with that either. So I think that when you're talking about material or you're talking about a discussion, there's this addition here about no notice is required if a school employee is responding to a question from a student during class. What if there's a statement from a student? What if there is an organic discussion that arises Does that fall under the exception here? I don't think that this is adequate in creating an exception here for that. So I think people are left wondering, what would be included in here, and I don't think that is going to be serve our students well. In addition, if you had questions that went further in a discussion, at what point does the teacher have to shut that down to the detriment of perhaps some of the other students in the class whose parents may want to have certain discussions in the class? This isn't, just simply an opt-out. This seems to be going much further than that. So for all those reasons, we object to the bill.
Thank you very much. Representative Lauren Silly.
I think she had to go move on to what she was doing now.
She's not out there?
She's not out there.
Okay, thank you very much. Is anybody else here who wants to speak on it? Representative Ickes? This is on 1312.
Yes, I found
Okay.
the information that I had lost, which is why I crossed it off. And I found it, so there were comments that these things are not going on in our schools today. And this is, I'm going to just read this little bit. And it's on many school districts. Right now, I'm reading from Manchester. The board recognizes the student's right to keep privacy one's transgender status or gender nonconforming presentation at school. Information about a student's transgender status, legal name, or gender assigned at birth may also constitute confidential information. School personnel should not discuss information that may reveal a student's transgender status or gender nonconforming presentation to others unless legally required to do so, or unless the student has authorized such disclosure. Transgender and gender nonconforming students have the right to discuss and express their gender identity and expression openly and to decide when and with whom and how much to share private information. Nothing herein shall be construed to change the obligation of the school to take action when student safety is concerned. And that continues on, including talking to the parent. So, yes, schools are still pushing that parents will not be notified. This is currently on the Manchester website.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. That concludes the hearing on 1312.
Senator Ward, could I speak, please?
You wanted to say something?
I actually put that I didn't want to speak, but I did sign on to the list. I just
Okay.
wasn't planning to testify. Thank you.
Could you give me your name again?
Michelle Silly-Foisy
Michelle,
from Temple, and I'm here in opposition to HB 1312. I am a mother of 6. Having given birth to 4 of my children and being blessed with the other 2 through marriage, I have always been a strong advocate for my children. From the moment they entered my world, I have never felt they belong to me. They are not my possessions. I have always called them my little people, as they are just that, their own person. I believe they have the same rights as we as adults have, and as parents, we are here to see that they are allowed these rights. I did not become a parent to control their path and future. I'm here as their mother only to love them unconditionally, support and guide them along their way as they look for me to do, and care for them with no bounds. As I was mentioning earlier, I was not aware that my now 17-year-old had been experiencing gender dysphoria since the age of 13. Feeling lost in their own body, they struggled to even look at themselves in the mirror, but yet I did not hear of this until their 16th year. Last summer, my teen was in such a dark place that they tried to take their own life while feeling incredibly isolated and alone in their thoughts. Today, they have the full support of their parents, their family, and their friends as they begin their own journey to living in a body that feels more like their home. In October of 23, they asked all of us to begin to use they, them pronouns. I cannot help but think how they would have felt if they had reached out to someone sooner. If my teen had chosen to speak to one of their teachers and ask them to use they them pronouns before they were ready to ask me to use their new pronouns, I can say with confidence that I would have felt incredibly thankful for the support of their teachers. Being able to share who you are with the world is incredibly important to all human beings. Feeling accepted and uplifted by others when sharing who we are is one of the healthiest experiences we can have as people. Having the support accessible in any and every way is essential to allowing all people to thrive in their own lives, including while at school. As a parent, I do not feel threatened or negated by others supporting my children. I am grateful every day that each of them feel the love that others may have for them, and I wish this for all the little people in the Granite State. Sharing with their teachers and their school community what pronouns they wish to use in school will only allow them to feel supported and will do no harm. Parents and families allowing this important freedom will only contribute to the 603 youth in a positive way. HB 1312 claims to protect parents' rights, but instead it leads to direct harm to the LGBTQ youth in New Hampshire. Please vote ITL for HB 1312.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Lang.
Thank you. So taking section 1 of this bill, not talking about section 2, but section 1, it talks about parental notification.
Yes.
Do you think it's at any point a school should notify a parent of what's being taught outside of math, reading, science, English, those kind of things that are with these topics? Do you think parents deserve any notification at all?
I think that parents that are involved in their child's education are talking to their kids about what they're learning in school. And as a parent, I feel that if one of my children comes to me and says, Mama, we're learning about this in school, I talk to them about it. And if I have concerns, I would reach out to the teacher then. I don't feel threatened by things that kids are taught in schools. I feel very trusting of the teachers in schools. That's myself as a parent. I'm also a physical therapist, so I'm in the medical community, and I feel it's important for kids to learn about their bodies and to learn about everyone around them and what everyone around them also experiences in their own bodies. I don't think it's harmful for kids to learn about those things in schools.
Thank you. Follow up?
Follow up.
Again, so the question isn't whether it's harmful or not. The question is, should parents be notified that the school is stepping outside the normal traditional roles of math, reading, science, English, all the traditional educational topics, and stepping into this area of study? Do they not? Does a parent ever deserve the right of notification, or is it just they have to go find out on their own by asking?
I hear your question, Senator Lang. I didn't mean to ignore it. I guess I was trying to say that I feel that, first of all, I think health education is part of the general curriculum in schools. Even in my elementary students' grades, they talk about health and they talk about different parts of human anatomy in a way that a elementary school kid can understand. I think that it's not necessary to specifically call out and say that we're going to be talking about gender identity with these kids today. I as a parent don't think it's necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else sitting here who wants to talk on 1312? Seeing none, that closes the hearing on House Bill 1312. Quickly move on to House Bill 1311. Representative Page introduce.
I can try to grab him. He's right out here.
Okay.
I'll grab him right now.
This is 1312. Okay, well, that's fine. That's right.
Okay, so you gotta decide whether,
Well, we'll
we don't need to call for public hearings, but,
go to 10 minutes of, and then we'll have the recess. if
okay,
we're
they
not
need a
finished.
little, so they need some set up.
Yeah.
so maybe quarter.
No, we're gonna have to be here because the three of us are on transportation.
Yeah, but then they need.
Yeah, they need, okay.
They need
right,
kind of
okay,
switch them.
okay. So did we find Representative Page? Okay.
Hi. Thank you for indulging me. I'm moving slowly. Madam Chair, have I been recognized? Thank you. Good morning, Senators, and thank you for indulging me there. I'm moving a little slowly today. Here today to talk about HB 1311. This is a bipartisan bill. I think it's a common sense bill. And when I talk about controversial materials in school libraries, I like to think that we have a choice in how we engage in that discussion. We can either retreat to our respective corners, or we can agree to turn down the temperature, and we can ask whether we actually share most of the same values and goals when we're talking about this issue. I think we all want high quality school library collections for our kids. I think we all want due process for concerned parents, school board transparency, and local control over school policy. I think we all value non-discrimination as a bedrock principle and support students' access to diverse books and multiple points of view. So this is a bill, a bipartisan, common sense bill, which takes a balanced approach in upholding all of these shared goals. And I ask you for your support. So what does this legislation do? So it's pretty simple. Under this legislation, districts would have to adopt two policies. The first policy is a collection development policy. And a collection development policy, for those who don't know, it just delineates the criteria that staff are expected to use when they're selecting books and other materials for the library. Common criteria in such policies include the fit with the curriculum. It includes developmental appropriateness of materials. It includes the authoritativeness of the information in the materials. So this is common practice as it is, but this bill would require that this policy be in place, okay? The other piece that this bill would require is a reconsideration policy. Again, this is a typical policy, but this would make it required rather than recommended. So that's a policy which describes the process for how a parent or guardian would make a request to have materials removed or reshelved. And again, this would just make that a required policy rather than a recommended policy. So these policies under this legislation, we're not putting a lot of stipulations on exactly how those need to look. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about why that's the choice we made. In general, it's to give districts some flexibility because different contexts require some different details in those policies. But it does require that the policies are in substantial compliance with the New Hampshire law against discrimination. And I hope that's something we can all agree on. So this means that the policies will not exclude books based solely on an author or subject's identity within a protected class, such as race, sexual orientation, etc. And the language in the bill comes directly from the New Hampshire law against discrimination. the exact same protected classes. So I want to address some misinformation that I've heard, okay? To be really clear, this does not mean, this bill does not say, nor is it the bill's intent, that you could never remove a book because a character in the book is black, because a character in the book is gay. It merely says you cannot remove the book on that basis, right? So if it somehow in some other manner does not meet the district selection criteria, we can talk about it, right? But you're not going to say we're getting rid of that book because it has a gay character in it, okay? I want to make sure that's really clear because folks have said somehow this will prevent you from ever taking a book out. So why is this here? So the provision recognizes that while many requests for removal are made in good faith, others have been made with the goal of removing diverse perspectives from the stacks. So of 2,000 different books, that's different titles that have been targeted for removal in school libraries in the United States last year. Nearly 3/4 were by or about Black people, people of color, or LGBTQ people. So that's why we need that embedded in the policy. District policies must additionally avoid viewpoint-based discrimination. So I see this as not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. I see this as a First Amendment issue. And as the US Supreme Court ruled in PICO, when it defined viewpoint-based discrimination, it said school boards may not remove books in seeking to prescribe which shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion. And regardless of which side of the aisle you stand on, I believe this body should stand on the side of the freedom to read and against censorship in our free marketplace of ideas. And I truly believe that this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. And this is not an issue that only comes from, that is brought up by people from one party or the other. I would remind folks that a few years ago, we had folks who probably are on my side of the aisle with a whole furor over Dr. Seuss. Do you remember this? Little House on the Prairie. So this is not something that just is Democrats or Republicans. This is about the First Amendment. So HB 1311 is bipartisan legislation and it equips us to prevent discrimination, but it does that while preserving local control and guaranteeing concerned parents and guardians due process, which I hope we all agree is incredibly important. It's rooted in a deep respect for fundamental principles of free expression and the diverse students and families we serve. And I hope you will join me in our bipartisan co-sponsors in voting for this solution. So happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Questions from the committee member. Let me just remind everyone before we go any further, we have to be out of here by 12:45. There's another committee coming in here. So whatever we don't finish today is going to have to be recessed and we'll take it up next Tuesday.
So we'll have an opportunity. Do you want me to hold my questions?
No, you ask the question. I think we can probably finish this bill.
Okay,
We have to
thank
be
you.
out
I
of here
just-
by quarter off.
I'm sensitive to the time issue as well. Thank you, Representative Page, for bringing this bill forward and taking my question. So I have a couple of them, but I'm going to just try to do this really quickly. If I heard you in your opening, you are saying, like we have, there's a Senate version of this, and here is your House version. Is it your position that the House version provides more flexibility to the local governmental body, the school districts, to build these policies versus the Senate version? Is this more rooted in local control and involvement?
I would say that it isn't a House version of anything. I'd say it's its own bill. But in terms of, but I do.
Fair enough.
But,
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
Yes, but it does prioritize local school board control. And I'll tell you why I'm passionate about that, is they're directly accountable to their local voters. So if they don't like the collection development policy that the school board drafted, or they don't like how the reconsideration policy or how it's working for them, then the people can vote them out, right? I think that's the critical factor here. Is it should be about local community standards, and local control.
Okay,
So.
great.
I'll follow up.
I think there's other people that want to ask questions. So your version, the version that you have brought forward, there's so 354-827. I don't have my computer open, but I looked it up quickly. That's the Human Rights Commission's provision in statute. So are they taking on the say if there's an enforcement issue or somebody has a concern, like, but it stays all local, but it refers to their standard?
I don't think enforcement would fall there any more than it already does. I would say the particular RSA that is being amended here has to do with the State Board of Education's responsibilities. So the State Board of Education, if you not right where you pointed, but back to the beginning of the bill.
All right.
So the State Board of Education is requiring each local school board to develop these policies. So to the extent that they are already responsible for enforcing equal educational opportunity, that would continue. But it's not adding any new burden.
I'm just familiar with the provision and
Yep.
doing some back and forth about 354-827. So it caught my attention, and I'll
Yep.
hold for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, you have just
I don't see anything in this bill that sets a timeline for response by this local school board in your section 2 that talks about reconsideration of library materials. There's no timelines whatsoever in this bill requiring them to act in a timely fashion.
It does not set a timeline, but it requires that the policy include a timeline. I would be happy to discuss with you further, if you would like, after the hearing, any possible solutions to that, if that's something that's important to you. I would say that the reason we, in the legislation before you, did not specify a particular timeline is that depending on your district, different timelines are going to be realistic. I think in a typical district, you might get a single complaint and you can dispatch it quite efficiently, and should, right? I don't think, we're not trying to slow walk anything here. You should dispatch the complaint efficiently. However, what we have seen in certain districts is, for example, someone will come forward with 30 simultaneous expressions of concern. I think those should all be taken seriously. Every one of them should be dispatched as efficiently as possible. But when we put a specific timeline onto that district from the state, when Concord puts a specific timeline on them from the state, they no longer have the flexibility to do the due diligence that they really should, right? Somebody should read the material. Whoever the designee is should read the material in its entirety, make that determination. And so there are these specific instances, which are not imaginary, they're real instances that are happening in the state, and we need to make sure that districts have the flexibility to deal with that. If you wanted to work together to find some way to kind of have it both ways there, maybe we could have a target timeline with something for an extenuating circumstance, I'd be willing to have that discussion. But that's the reason it's presented as it is.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think you have time to hear one more person. Stephen Scare.
Computer to fall out once you walk away.
Anytime.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I've waited all morning. I'm Representative Forestiello.
Pardon?
I've waited all morning to speak on this. I'm Representative Forestiello. I've spoken to House on this bill.
We have to be out of here
I
in
understand. There's at all
5 minutes.
after him. I would like that.
Well, can you come back next Tuesday? We'll reopen the hearing next Tuesday, and I will listen to the rest of the people who have not had a chance to testify today. There's not much we can do about it. I'm sorry. Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm going to ask you to vote inexpedient to legislate on this bill because it doesn't stop book banning. It censors the public. Our school libraries are members of the American Library Association. They offer a webinar to help librarians flag transphobic works using a catalog resource called Homosaurus. The ALA's slides feature Abigail Shrier's Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters. Our libraries love banning books. Aside from this overt examples, our library selects books based on reviews from journals affiliated with the association and that share their values. So if the book isn't pushed by the ALA, it's effectively banned. Cries of book banning and this bill are ploys to stop anyone who stands in the way of the ALA's agenda. Queering the catalog is a top priority of ALA President Emily Drabinski, who describes herself as a Marxist. She's also a proponent of queer theory. Like critical race theory, queer theory isn't really a theory, but a political ideology. It seeks to change power structures by promoting transgender and queer identities. I've spoken to my local library trustees about the story Jack Not Jackie, where a girl is relabeled as a boy and given a new name and pronouns because she hates frilly pink dresses, plays superhero, and splashes in the mud. It's cruel to tell children there is a right way and a wrong way to be a girl or a boy. Granddad's Pride, a children's book for ages 4 through 8, portrays various gender expressions, including men in bondage costumes with codpieces. And there's no limit to what our libraries will offer children. The ALA's policy states that it, quote, opposes all attempts to restrict access to library materials based on the age of library users. In an op-ed, this bill's sponsors asserted that none of the challenged books qualify as pornography or remotely fit well-established definitions of obscenity. But if an illustration depicting oral sex doesn't qualify as pornography, what does? This isn't a slippery slope, it's a free fall. So please vote ITL on this book, which would not only allow our librarians to continue banning books, but would also censor anyone who objects to them sexualizing and indoctrinating our children.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. And at this point, I think we're going to have to end the hearing, recess until next Tuesday, and then we'll pick up everything that we haven't done today. Now, if any one of you you have the option of writing and emailing in your testimony if you would prefer to do that instead of coming in next Tuesday, but this will be the first thing we'll do next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry we haven't finished, but this is what it is.
Thank you, Madam Chair.